whether you have been able to hold individual police officers to account and go beyond that and hold the commanders to account, because that is within your mandate. Or do you just focus on those constables, those very junior police officers who are acting under instructions? Of course, you need to do that. But do you go beyond that and deal with and act on their commanders who have given the instructions? 2, and this is more specific, and I want to focus now on the recent demonstrations and attendant deaths and injuries from police actions. From your records, say since the beginning of this year, up now, how many Kenyans have lost their lives from police bullets and or truncheons? And I want to tell you, very honest with you, at the last count, we had 73 lost lives. And now speaking as Azimio, you can dispute or confirm. But from your end, because you are financed by taxpayers to do exactly that, how many lives of Kenyans were lost from police brutality during the demonstrations? And how many cases have you documented of those who had injuries? Many of them are still in hospital as we speak. And if you really care, I could share with you privately outside this forum the details. It's a serious matter, I'm sure you know. Yes. I'm happy my friend Osman Omar is in agreement with that, with me on that here. Now, you have said that you are handicapped. You know, at one point I felt very sorry for you people. When the IG of police referred to you as busybodies. You see? The current one referred to you people as busybodies. Of course, you responded meekly. No. As people who have got no teeth. But even as you lament lack of prosecutorial powers, have you cared to understand that you can institute private prosecution? And you have got lawyers here in your midst. I can see veteran lawyer, Proceedings. Yes. Yeah, all lawyers, very eminent lawyers. And eminent thinkers like my friend Dr. Ogon. Okay? Why haven't you taken steps? Because desperate times call for desperate measures. Extraordinary times require that you adopt extraordinary measures. Because if you did that, and eventually the prosecution is stopped, which obviously would happen sometimes, then the public would have taken note. Yeah, how the kind of resolve you have. So I'm just trying to plead with you that even as you seek to be entrenched, to be empowered, to be strengthened, can you do what you need to do with the current powers that you have? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chairs. I think just picking up from where Honorable Ndai left, it came from you that indeed some of the officers have been partisan, particularly during elections. But even in the recent demonstrations, Maandamano, it was very, very clear that some of the officers are partisan. You could see officers saying, we have allowed these demonstrations to go on, we have banned those demonstrations, we will not allow those demonstrations. And Article 37 of our Constitution is very clear. That right, the freedom to demonstrate, the freedom to protest, to picket, is guaranteed by our Constitution. It does not depend on the generosity of Bwana Bungei in Nairobi or IG Kome. but you could see these officers actually purporting to allow or disallow. And some demonstrations were very violently handled. Some of us in this dialogue committee were victims. Some of us lost very close friends. Some of us lost our bodyguards, who are actually not just brutalized, injured, but some were shot and killed by police officers. And you could tell that that partisanship was very evident. They couldn't allow demonstrations here in Nairobi, but when we have issues of some money being stolen for students going to Finland, demonstrations were allowed in Eldoret. When there would be tea machines in Kericho being brought and the citizens came out to demonstrate, demonstrations were allowed. But in Kisumu, in certain parts of Western, in Nairobi, the violence, the brutality of the police was shocking. Now that you yourselves admit this partisanship, we want to hear from you. What have you done to address this issue? Because it's a growing menace to enjoyment of fundamental rights and freedoms in our Constitution, particularly Article 37. And it also goes against what you have yourselves told us in Article 244 that requires the highest standards of professionalism and discipline in our officers. Partisanship shows lack of professionalism. It also shows probably the lack of proper training, because you have said one of the issues there you look at is the training of our officers under Article 244D to the highest, in fact, not high standards, the highest standards of competence, integrity, respect for human rights, and fundamental freedoms and dignity. So these are issues we would like you to address us on. But having witnessed firsthand the brutality and abuse of human rights by our police officers, I want to ask you if you are aware that we have about 1,000 police officers from Kenya who will be dispatched to Haiti, and there's an uproar internationally because of the recent abuse of human rights by our police. The world is worried that these police officers who abuse human rights here in Kenya might export that police brutality, abuse of human rights in Haiti and on the international stage where they're now being sent. Are you aware that this decision has been made? Will IPOB be involved, or have you been prepared to extend that oversight to our officers who will be going to Haiti if they are going to export the same police brutality outside our borders, which will reflect very seriously on our image internationally? We want you to address us on that, because what we know or what we've heard about Haiti, they are not the stone-throwing demonstrations that maybe you might have been told about. These are gangs that are heavily armed. These are gangs that have killed their own leaders. And we are sending our young people in uniform, in harm's way, to face these gangs. Many of them may not come back alive. Are you aware of this development? Will you be oversighting this? We would like you to address us on that. Lastly, You have said you received over 437 complaints. I think that was from the last elections. I would like to know how many have you concluded, which ones are still how many are still under investigations out of those 437. Would also like to know, in the post-election period, that is in the Maandamano period, how many complaints have you received? And in the face of the serious police brutality witnessed in this country, and I want to confirm what the Honorable Pio and I have said, because as principals of Azimio, we have been working with these families, we have buried their dead, we have visited hospitals, and we have witnessed firsthand that those 73 Kenyans, many of them were very young, between 18 and 25, the oldest was about 30. Post-mortem reports were availed to us, showing they were shot by the police, and the cause of death were gunshot wounds, many of them to the backs of their heads, many of them in their backs. We would like you to tell us whether you have received these complaints, whether you have visited some of these mortuaries in Kisumu and other parts of this country, in Nairobi, and whether you are aware of these killings by a special unit of our police. We would like you to confirm that, whether you are aware of a team of police in Subarus that are called Special Support Units, SSU, and whether you are also, as per your mandate, oversighting this killer squad of a special police unit. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Eugene and I today decided we are the people who speak the longest, so we manage you as you manage me. Obilianka?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll be rather brief compared to the previous speaker. I'm normally brief. I'll go straight onto the 2/3 gender rule and your input as IPOA. First of all, I want to appreciate that you have made your presentations very clearly on that. But again, underscore the fact that you are actually, the police force is really suffering from the 2/3 gender balance. Looking at the numbers you have mentioned, 10,000, 14,000 against the 200,000 or how many thousands of police. What have you done as a sector? Or what do you recommend in order to cover up this? I have seen during recruitments the bias that is there, especially on the girl child. It's like you allocate very few numbers for the girls, and yet they have equal opportunity in this country. Why hasn't it actually brought up a formula? Like we are trying to sit here and bring up a formula on how to cater for the 2/3 gender rule, and let it also flow across the police, especially on the girl child. Secondly, you also mentioned on something on the professionalism, I think of the IPOA board or IPOA, whatever, generally. You said 3/4 of the composition is actually officers. Why haven't you not put up a recommendation on other professionals to be included?
The National Police Service.
The National Police Service
Commission.
Service Commission to be included apart from just officers and maybe the few other professionals that you have. Why can't we have a scenario where you cut across all sections? We have the professionals like the lawyers, even teachers, stuff like that. And finally, I get back to the demonstrations. During the demonstrations, people's properties were destroyed, businesses were devastated, and the police did very little actually to protect these groups. I can't say it was only in Azimio regions. Everybody was affected across the board. Kenya Kwanza sections were affected. Azimio regions were affected. So generally, what did you do, or what do you recommend that can be done? Or have you done even anything about it in the first place? Thank you.
Amina.
Thank you, Chair. My first question will be on the statements that were made by the Inspector General, Koome. He denied about the police brutality during the protests. He even went ahead to assert that Azimio la Umoja is hiring dead bodies and trying to paint a bad picture to the government and towards the police force. So as IPOA, did you investigate into this matter? Did you find out whether these people were dead? Were they really hired? Or were they really killed? So what's your take on that? Question number 2, we have also noticed as Kenyans that there is the raiding and sometimes kidnapping of certain high-profile individuals in broad daylight. IPOA, do you have anything to say about that? Thank you.
And now to just make my comments. But one of the reasons I really want IPOA to work is, you remember I was a commissioner in NCIC. And I remember walking into the late Saitoti's office and asking him to ensure that there's a policing oversight authority. In fact, this bill, the draft came actually from the Commission on Human Rights. I used to do policing oversight within the security sector reforms program. And I realized the scale and magnitude. So my first question to you, Anne, 10 years on, what are the deficiencies? Because definitely there are deficiencies, particularly within the Act. The anchorage in law or in the Constitution is one. We try to find place for IPOA within Article 59 of the Constitution so that we can create, upload, because it says that through that you can create more than one commission. But I think we were not able to necessarily locate it within the Article 59 commissions. I do agree, but what else do you think needs to be done in terms of legal reforms of the IPOA Act to upscale it to that extent where it is effective? 2, the president came on the promise that there will be no extrajudicial killings. And I do still believe that that is the position. The justification would only be what is contained in the National Police Act on the use of force as measurable and directly proportional to the loss of the lives of others. So I do hope you will respond to some of those queries by Opio on the basis that responds to the realm of the law, rule of law. I do not think the Kenya Kwanza government is in any way in support of an errant police force, a rogue police, or a regime police. But the second last question, the whole idea of police reforms, and you're supposed to be the police auditor. You're like an audit firm for the police, not only in terms of its accountability, but in terms of tracking its reforms, unless that mandate is not assumed in that act. The whole idea about police reforms was to move us away from a regime police to a democratic policing service. In your assessment, I can see very eminent people here, lawyers, doctors, social scientists. What do you think, how much progress would you say we have made from the advent of the 2010 Constitution to move ourselves away from a regime police to a policing service? And in that event, what more is required in terms of legislative, structural, or policy reforms? And lastly, the whole idea of also these shifts, there was the whole idea of police reforms or security sector reforms was premised on the fact that we needed to move away from the securitization of our democracy, that paradigm, to the democratization of our security. We move away from the securitization of our democracy, kwamba kila kitu ni serikali, matter of national security. In fact, there was a Director General of the NIS who tried to insert are close to limit the Bill of Rights to national security. We discovered it at some point. So at that time when we were voting the 2010 Constitution. So in other words, human rights is not limited in the purview solely of national security. There are limitations that are created by the Constitution itself. So we wanted to move ourselves to the democratization of our security. The democratization of our security means people should be engaged more engaged in participation of our security apparatus. So the question will be, do you think this police service is doing enough in terms of democratization of our security outside these conventional things of nyumba kumi sijui and vitu kama hizo, or DCs and DOs and chiefs and whatnot? Is there been sufficient shift in terms of the paradigm? But finally to Opio and I think we will really expect an independent report from your team, and you can be very sure that there is no government that is not limited by the rule of law, and there's no government, the Kenya Kwanza government is not keen or is not intent on protecting where rogue police officers have been involved in taking the lives of others in a manner brutal. So therefore it should not be purported by their sentiments that there is any sanitization on our part. If you do your job, then I'm quite sure actions will be taken. But my last comment, I do not agree with giving you prosecutorial powers. There must be separation of powers. That's why we wanted the police to investigate, the DPP to prosecute. So you must continue to investigate, let another arm prosecute.
Quickly, please respond.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to respond to some. I may invite my colleagues to respond to the others. What has IPOA done within its mandate? Honorable Wandai, Chair, you raised this question, what has IPOA done within its mandate, whether we've been able to hold police to account, and what have we done in terms of command responsibility. I would say that IPOA has done a lot. Probably one of our deficiencies is not going too much to the media. But in terms of accountability, we've done a lot. We've done many recommendations. We've completed record investigations within the time of our lifespan as the board that is continuing. And indeed, we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. Here we are being told we haven't done enough. You talk to the police officers, they don't want to see us. They say we are the worst team that ever came into being. We've increased the number of files that are with the DPP. We found about 60 files in courts. We've moved that number to 170. We have over 380 files lying at the DPP. And in total, we've forwarded over 500 files to the DPP. So a lot has been done. We've engaged DPP to try and see how that process can move faster. And at one point during the former DPP, he established a human rights desk to help review those files. And there are 2 points to it. One could be those that we have recommended prosecution so that they make progress, and could be those that are pending and the officers need to be exonerated and the cases are still pending. So it cuts both ways. When these files are not attended quickly, there are those officers who are suffering, their files are still pending. And also there are those Kenyans whose files need to be prosecuted and the files are pending. It's work in progress. There are many reasons that have been given for this, including the fact that DPP, of course, receives files from many people, and those files are handled against the capacity that that office has. In terms of command responsibility, we've tried. We have Baby Pendo case, which was initially done public inquest, and the judiciary recommended prosecution of very many officers. It was brought back to DPP. We supported DPP in investigating that case, And our conclusion was that there must be command responsibility. Again, that file is still sitting with the DPP. But our recommendation is that there has to be an element of command responsibility in certain matters. Baby Pendo is a good case. There is a case we call Nambale that was withdrawn without further consultation to us, where we had made recommendation for command responsibility. Again, that office does not report to us in terms of oversight. So when cases are withdrawn, the law allows them to do that. There is nothing much we can do. But in terms of IPOA position, there are instances where there is need for command responsibility. In terms of the next question that the chairman asked was deaths and injuries arising out of the demonstrations. The report that we shall be submitting has that data. In summary, we received 237 complaints involving 359 complainants. That is the period.
You say the report you're submitting now or when?
No.
The report you shall be submitting has got that data.
Yes, the one that you have directed that we sent through the email.
Okay.
Has that data.
And is it for election or post-election period?
CEO will be speaking into that, but it's also available. That data is also available. In terms of demonstrations, we received 237 during this period between Sabasaba and the time there was ceasefire when this team was established. We received 237 complaints involving 359 complainants. Deaths that we received as IPOA are 57 that are under active investigation. Some of them are the tail deaths. Deaths that we have captured. Deaths, before.
Of death?
Yes. Within the period of demonstration.
That you confirmed?
That the reports that IPOA has. The data that we have on deaths is 57.
Not 73.
Not 73. And this is how they are classified. Kisumu 33, Nakuru 2,
slowly.
Nairobi 20.
Come again?
They are all under investigation, but Kisumu we had 33, Nakuru 2, Nairobi 20, Kakamega 2. Injuries were a number of them, and all that data is in this report that we shall be submitting to the committee. In terms of extrajudicial killings and the ability to institute private prosecution, I think Honorable Omar has already spoken into that. We've been seeking prosecutorial powers because you're a government entity, and you have had the position of the crafters of these documents. The position is that there should be separation of powers, and therefore, as a government entity, unless this team gives us prosecutorial powers, the law ties us to make recommendations to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution.
So are you saying the law is such that it constrains you from undertaking private prosecution?
Yes.
Explicitly?
We cannot do private because you're government. We are a government entity.
Under what law?
IPOA Act.
Yeah, I'm asking you, is it explicit in the Act that you can't undertake private prosecution? And if you juxtapose that with the provisions of Article 157, let's help us understand. Yeah.
Sure. IPOA can do private prosecutions. What we are saying is that when we do our investigations and need to give recommendations to the ODPP, we have to wait until the ODPP now either agrees with our recommendations or returns the file to us to ask us to add on the evidence that he thinks perhaps does not meet the threshold. And during that process, because sometimes we finish our investigations very quickly, most of the investigations are over. But as you have heard from the figures, the files that are pending before the ODPP are too many. And we continue doing our investigations and forwarding our recommendations there. That's why we were asking for prosecutorial powers.
So, Waiganjo?
Yes.
Some of those files can stay there forever?
Yes.
In theory?
Sometimes in theory, they will stay there forever. sometimes when they go to court, they'll be withdrawn without reference to the independent policing.
Can you do us a favor, Wigancho? Can you give us an analysis of the files that you have taken to the DPP,
certainly,
those that have been prosecuted and those that are still pending?
That will be done right away, Chair. We have our CEO here who is in charge of the Secretariat, and we will give out those figures. But on to the matter that was also brought forth on the extrajudicial killings, we would also want this committee to take extrajudicial killings in law now legislatively from Manda. Yeah, Manda extrajudicial killing. We want a demarcation in law because we talk about extrajudicial killings and there is also Manda. So we want a clarity in that, and that can only be found in law. And then on abductions, we want a clear reference between abduction and enforced disappearance. Because the law is broad. We do not have a clear-cut law. When you say, because you cannot, sometimes there's an abduction and then you reappear. So you had disappeared, but you have appeared. So we are not clear on when are you abducted or when there is an enforced disappearance. The president also assured us that we would be carrying out an inquest, an inquiry on enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killings. So we want that to come forth so that the citizens can come and give their stories. Because the files are many, we've post-mortem reports, we have a challenge of witnesses coming to us because also the witness protection program does not have sufficient budget to cover our witnesses. We have lost witnesses clearly when we have good cases. So those are some of the challenges we have. And I want to leave it now so that you can get the actual figures from our CEO.
Salake, you're the CEO unless otherwise.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to repeat what has already been spoken to, but probably just to clarify on the issue of the command responsibility, that as I pour for the first time, innovatively together with the DPP, we've been able to take a case to court. Actually, Baby Pendo case is a case in court where 12 senior police officers from county commanders are now in court. And that is by way of us taking the responsibility higher, beyond the constables on the ground. So this is a live matter which is currently in court, and we will be able to see the progression of that case in court. I don't know, Chair, you may wish to speak to the IT question. I'll leave that to the Chair. On the issue of extrajudicial killings, we have, of course, what has been explained by Honorable Waiganjo, but beyond that, as an authority, we have clarity on what we are doing. The cases we are able to investigate where it has been determined through investigations that we are able to identify the people responsible in those enforced disappearance or in extrajudicial killing have been taken through investigations. However, where we are not able to determine directly the police involvement, the commission or the authority has decided that it will undertake public inquiry, which will be able to, to determine exactly the circumstances and also determine accountability. So I think that is all I would want to clarify.
When you are still on the floor,
yes.
What about the other, you see, when you stretch your imagination in terms of the electoral injustices?
Yes.
There were complaints here by IBC.
Yes.
The officers were assaulted, murdered, etc., etc.
Yes.
There's been little police action. Can you please also look into why there's police inaction on complaints filed by IBC commissioners and the commission itself on part of the abductions, murder, assault, and other vestiges against the law? Secondly, I remember there are these men who are working in the KK Secretariat, the Indian nationals, who were actually abducted by the DCI and were killed in some container. They had a killing container somewhere. what is the extent of the fate of those men from the DCI?
Okay, maybe picking up on the last one about the Indians. I think this is a matter, again, which is, of course, in court. And between IPOA and the DCI, we were able to make a presentation. And I think I would rather ask the head of legal to speak to that matter with clarity.
Yes, thank you. As the CEO has stated, that the matter is currently in court. The matter is being handled by, of course, IPOA, and also the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service is dealing with that investigation, and the matter is currently in court.
On the issue of IBC, yes, there were the reports, of course, cases we are handling where IBC officers were assaulted, allegedly by police. A case we are handling is the case of the IBC officer in Wajir, and we have made a very advanced investigation on this, and these are matters which are basically towards conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the issue of partisan approach and the IG banning demonstrations, I'll ask the Vice Chair to speak into that. Then Commissioner Muthaura can speak into the issue of Haiti.
Let's try to now wind up. Yes, within the next 5 minutes.
Okay.
Dr. Deputy Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, chairs and honorable members. It's true. In our records and in our presentation, we mentioned that there is some partisan in the police, but generally I want to put it clearly that not all police are partisan. Of course, everybody is relating with the police in one way or the other. It is true. If you look at the statistics from IPOA, about 99% of the police are doing a good job, but 1% has some issues. And sometimes when one person becomes rogue or one person makes a statement, it's not a general statement for all the police. Of course, somebody may be in a command position many times, and where they go wrong, it is very clear with the IPOA statement today that we have no compromise at all. We may look like we are crying here and there, but statistically, if you look at this document later, you will realize that no police officer is above any action from IPOA. And we have summoned even people in very high ranks. So bipartisan, yes, because of course you can see some elements here and there. But generally, the police are doing a good job. Of the IG, of course, people have the right to say what they want to when they get the podium. And interestingly, chairs, we have asked the IG why he made that statement. And as he denied other statements he made before, he also denied that he did not make reference to IPOA during the busybody statement. However, he made it, and we are cautious. We are cautious about the engagement and what we need to do in official and formal way. On the question of hired bodies, that was strange. It was very strange. And members, individuals have ways of saying what they want to. IPOA, as given by these figures, is very clear. We go to witness in the crime scene area. We go and attend the postmortem. Postmortem reports are with us in all general reports. And I think that should not be a substantive issue to discuss for now. Thank you, Chair.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you say is strange? What do you mean exactly?
I mean, when he makes those statements,
yes,
those statements must be factual and supported by figures, right? But you know, a blanket statement
But that is if he's being professional.
Yeah.
That is if he's being professional.
Can Doreen please answer the last set of questions?
Just before she answers, just the issue of two-thirds general rule is something that we always talk about, something we have also raised with the National Committee in Parliament to ensure that in terms of recruitment, they increase the number of women, because they do in such a way that women are not, even in the entry level, they are not given equal opportunity. So that's something we have picked up, even at the top level. In fact, there used to be Madam Kaindi, and once she was removed, there was no more representation there. So it's something that we really want the parliamentarians to pick it up themselves and ensure that that thing happens, that we get top leadership of women. Thank you.
Okay, Doreen.
Thank you, sir. On that,
Make it brief.
Absolutely. On just a quick one to add on to what Commissioner Fatma has said, and this is a question by Honorable Bilenga, that what have we done to ensure at least matters of female gender are considered in the service? We are involved. We conducted the first ever Women in Policing conference in the country, and we are pleased to inform you that it was very successful. And we are also supporting the establishment of Association of Female Police Officers in the service so that they're able to advance their own concerns within the service, and associations as recognized under Section 87 of NPSA. Now, on the issue of Haiti, we have also learned of the same from the media, and we have not been officially engaged on the same, but this is an appreciation that the Act, the NPSA, that is the National Police Service Act, provides for, or rather allows the Inspector General or the service generally to partner regionally and internationally with other services in matters of policing. Now, how the same is regulated, remember this is, once they leave the country, it's under international law. Remember, our scope is territorial. We are only able to deal with our officers while within our territorial space and when under the command of the Inspector General. That said, we are very concerned about the welfare of our officers as they engage or live for Haiti, and most importantly, training for them to be able to carry out the duties they are required to do while there. Now, one other issue on our act is that we can investigate officers during and even when they've left the service. So whatever the circumstances, we believe that if allowed under the various instruments that have been entered into, probably through mutual legal instrument by the Attorney General, the IG, and other entities that are involved, we hope that IPOA scope will be entrenched to allow us to deal with this matter when they are back into the territories. We are open to explore modalities of dealing with such, because this appears to be our first. And like KDF, where we've had this kind of processes, IPOA, in this instance, we are going to explore approaches on how to deal with the same. Sorry, sir, quick one on the issue of legislative intervention to allow the authority to proceed or carry out its duty. Truth is, if we don't have oversight, then in the service, NPS, or even those other services, we have seen what has happened, for example, in Marsabit, in Wajir, with the KWS, and so on. We request that entrench oversight for all those entities. The police feel targeted whenever they're involved even in a multi-agency approach or exercise of policing nature. It's only the police that are investigated. The other agencies are dealt with internally and mostly not in a very open manner. We request that we have existed from 2011 to date without regulations. Therefore, we're requesting that the regulations that are currently before the House, tabled before the Committee on Delegated Legislation, please be fast-tracked to enable us to have a legal framework that is self-executing. Well, the other issue, sir, is about compliance of the Act as it exists. That's a big challenge for us, and it's legislative in nature. We don't know to what extent we are supposed to be suing the various commanders to notify us of deaths that occur within or during police operation. This is an area we would want clarity on what IPOA ought to do or what action need to be taken by commanders who do not notify the authority within the 24-hour rule. then, of course, give us teeth to bite. I know Honorable Hassan has indicated that we shouldn't be given prosecutorial power. Truth be told is that the more people review the files, the more the delay and justice is actually, both for the police officer and for the people of Kenya, is delayed and therefore not served as it ought to be. Other challenges, sir, is that we are a young entity, rather, with a number of staff that is currently 260, and we have an approved establishment of nearly 3,000. We are requesting for funding to allow us to be able to spread ourselves throughout the Republic and, most importantly, serve in all Huduma centers. It is almost impossible to even explain to people what we do since we are not visible. We are requesting for funding to allow us for a planned expansion and so on. And we also request that through this dialogue, National Dialogue Committee, kindly uptake of our recommendations. All these matters, we have 26 reports submitted to the NPS, submitted to the Cabinet Secretary and Parliament, both houses, and we request, including to all the 47 county assemblies, we are required by law to submit the reports. But uptake of our recommendations is a big challenge, and we don't know how many or how much should we seek court intervention to ensure enforcement. From the oversight point of view and legislative point of view, Parliament help us deal with this matter. Thank you, sir.
Mwesh, make it very brief, because Mwesh, make it very brief. I like this subject is important for this committee, but make it very brief.
Thank you very much, Chair. Indeed, I want to say that let the committee not be worried that the IG, the Inspector General of Police, would make that kind of a statement and get away with it. I think it's important for the committee to know that we do have pending complaints against the IG himself. But I want the good doctor here to make a conclusion so that on the same issue of hired bodies.
Dr.
Thank you. Chairman, I want to say that when the IG makes a statement that bodies have been bought and transferred, we as IPOA, we just counter it with facts. And the fact of the matter is, I want to tell you from the forensic angle, a policeman who does not want to kill does not shoot above the waist. You shoot below the waist to immobilize. When we get pathology reports and we are capable of telling whether this was long range, short range shooting by the entry and exit of the bullet, or if the bullet is lodged within. And therefore, the reports that we have got those facts. The challenge sometimes, and I want to bring it out very carefully, is when we want forensic analysis of the weapon that was used. Then we sometimes encounter bottlenecks because this laboratory is under the control of the DCI. The DCI, to me, and I want you legislators, is part of the NPS. He is under the command of the IG, and he cannot be independent. He denies, or they alter the evidence because they have to give us the report of the weapon used. They say, as per our analysis, these weapons were not in the possession of the police as at the time of the action. That is one thing we encounter. Secondly, I want to say, do our police suffer from frustration? Are they in the wrong profession, or because of the amount of misplaced aggression that we see? I want to say that the police commanders have told us that when they go for recruitment, some of the people they recruit to Kiganjo College is forced on them by powers from elsewhere. And they are wondering whether the product they are training for 9 months in Kiganjo are actually coming out to be policemen and women, or people whose relatives and friends bought their way into the police training. I want to say this because we have seen incidents where police with their batons, and the case of the two brothers in Luanda, whom you buried, the post-mortem was explicit, saying they actually died of rungus, not even a gun. Why would a professional police officer continue to inflict injury to somebody whom they have already subdued, instead of either arresting the person and putting in the lorry and go and process the crime? Is it frustration inwardly? Is it because they think that they lord it over the population of the populace? We have got those issues. So I want to answer that statement of the IG that we will counter it with the facts. The only thing is that he may use his professional influence to deny us the ballistic and forensic reports from the forensic lab. And we must say that we have made a proposal that this forensic laboratory should be given autonomy away from the DCI. That's a proposal we have made, so that it does its job not only for the police. There are very many other organizations that would want to use that laboratory, including even the national government chemist, including the national public health laboratories. There are certain things that they will need to have analyzed there. We have got other institutions that would use that lab. So domiciling it strictly under the IG also hampers our work, because the DCI are part and parcel of the police. But we get the facts from that.
Thank you, Dr. Final word. I think I'll let the chair have the final word. Please, just no, Eugene, just let the chair have the final word.
There's a question they have not answered.
Yeah, just let the chair have a final word. And
yes,
then
yes,
if it is unanswered, we will ask again.
Chair, while you're concluding...
Can you please, Eugene, let the chair just say something?
Yes, as she concludes, there's one question you have not answered about, the abuse of human rights and the special support unit embedded in the police that has been responsible for some of these atrocious
You've asked the question. Let her answer, please.
Can you respond to that?
Chairman, could I seek for your indulgence to allow a question you raised on democratization of policing to be answered by Commissioner Torrey very shortly, please? Because that came from the chair.
Okay.
1 minute, please.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. You did raise the issue of securitization of security to democratization of security. I hope I understood your explanation on what you meant, and I would like to say that under our mandate of inspection of police premises, we do look out for human rights abuses and compliance, and we make our recommendations to the IG on what needs to be done, but also work with the officer in charge of the station to see what they can improve on. Currently, as a result of our recommendation, we have CPUs, that is child protection units, being built in a number of police stations. Also, from our monitoring mandate on police operations, we also monitor standards, human rights standards that are supposed to be maintained, and thereafter we make our recommendations. Also, on the issue of democratization, while carrying out our inspections, Chair, we also look out to see whether police stations have actually set up or established community policing committees. And what we have found is that a number of police stations have not come up with community policing committees, which involves membership of members of the public. So we want to pray that perhaps that's something you can pick up. We have made our recommendations to the IG to ensure that each police station and OCS complies with that requirement. Finally, there is also the requirement in law for establishments of county policing authorities. With county policing authorities, Mr. Chairman, this is supposed to be established by governors. And these, again, very, very few governors have established this. And the challenge here is that the county commissioners are supposed to be members of these county policing authorities. And there's a bit of conflict because the county commissioners have the county security committees. And so they feel uncomfortable to sit under a committee that is chaired by the governor on policing and security matters. So that's something you may need to look at. On tracking of police reforms, Chairman, we are currently working on all the recommendations that we have made to the IG and tracking and seeing which ones have been implemented, which ones have not been implemented, and we will share the report with yourselves. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As we conclude, I want to thank this committee for giving us an opportunity. In terms of special police units, for us, any injury or death arising out of police action, whether special or non-special, we treat it the same. It's an injury or death arising out of police action. And therefore, they are all held accountable, irrespective of the units. However, at the risk of repeating something that has been said here repeatedly, it's important that the bill that has been brought by Senate, has been published by Senate, Security Services Amendment Bill 2023, be supported to expand the mandate of IPOA, because we find when there is multi-agency operations, then IPOA is limited. We follow up the issues, then we find probably something was committed by somebody who is not necessarily a police officer in the way we know it at the NPS, and therefore our ability then to that extent gets challenged. So for us to be very effective, it's important that IPOA be entrenched in the Constitution as a Chapter 15 commission, and its mandate spread over uniformed services in regards to civilian engagement with all uniformed services, of course, except the defense, so that they can be held to account. Because you'll find that the multi-agency approach has all kinds of uniformed services.
Well, when once any security service, including the armed forces, is called in aid of civilian authority, then civilian law applies.
Yeah,
so they must be held accountable.
Except when they are under the operation of the IG. When they are under the operation of the IG, then they come under civilian oversight.
Yeah. Maybe,
Maybe just one last one in relation to what she was trying to answer. I wanted to chip in, but you came in handy. Some time back, His Excellency instituted the Maraga Task Force on police reforms. Do you have any report, or have you received anything on that since it was instituted? Thank you.
She sits in that task force.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. His Excellency, the President did appoint me as a member of the task force headed by Honorable CJ, and we are still on course and shall be giving our report. What we have discussed here is what we have as IPOA. In fact, in detail, the report will shed light on matters that affect police, NYS, and prisons, and prison service. And in addition to that, it will go into equipping, training, all these issues that have been asked by Mheshimiwa Eugene on SSU, or rather special police units and so on. So it's a very detailed report. I'm not under any right to share any view on that.
So Doreen, first and foremost, I want to thank you for one thing that you said about the mission to Haiti, about training and welfare. Absolutely. And I associate myself with the views of Dr. Ludumpoe, that 99% of our police officers is actually okay. Yes. Because we don't want to create an impression when this mission is in Haiti, by some of the sentiments here, that those Kenyan men and women have gone there to carry out abuses and put our sons and daughters in harm's way. I think they will carry out themselves with the highest international standards and training.
We believe so.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. We can see the leader of majority has just walked in. This is the team from IPOA. My name is Anne Makori, the chairperson. We've had engagements with the team, some of them very hot, but we believe we are equal to the task. We shall be submitting as directed by the chair, joint chair, a written report that comprises of what you said and other details that we think would help this committee arrive at an appropriate decision. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thank you too, IPOA. Weganjo was pleasantly surprised to see you, policing expert. But I really appreciate, we gave the length of time we did for this particular IPOA engagement because of the extent of which it is relevant to this committee. And I really thank you. You actually realized we did not, Article 43 and everything else, we really wanted this information from you. And we are grateful for your honesty and openness. And we hope we can get the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next group. Okay, I think we are set. Are we? So welcome. This is Wandoya Nawake. We have got maximum 20 minutes in this session. I'm sure members here are known to you, but we can save time. Is it? Yes. Then proceed and introduce yourselves and make the presentation.
Start our way, which is to say a prayer, a Muslim prayer and a Christian prayer. Mama Fatima, say a prayer, a brief one.
Let's say a prayer. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
Tuombe. Mungu Baba Mwenyezi, tunakuja mbele yako Baba wetu, tunakushukuru, tunakuinua na kukutukuza. Asante kwa siku hii muhimu. Tunakuomba tunapoanza, tuanze na wewe, hadi tutakapotamatisha uwe pamoja na sisi, kwa njia ya Kristo aliye Bwana na mkombozi wetu. Amen. So that I'm sure has not taken 2 minutes. You gave us 20, we can still work with 18 or 15. So I am here with some of the national team, and in Maendeleo we work on regional balance. So I have representation from Nyanza, she will speak, the National Secretary, I have Secretariat here from Eastern. I have Rift Valley National Vice Chair. I have Coast National Vice Chair. I have National Treasurer. And I have Mount Kenya represented at the end. So basically we are 5 regions here on behalf of the 8. So then allow me to start. His Excellency Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka in absentia.
Please avoid those protocols.
We avoid those protocols.
Yeah,
we
just go straight.
But then was you say leader of majority, because we are happy to have you there, and one day, and then we continue. Our preamble. Maendeleo is an non-governmental organization which seeks to nurture and empower women through various capacity building interventions that promote women's rights and sustainable livelihoods in the society. Maendeleo turned 70 years, somebody raised the book, turned 70 years last year, and it is the oldest and largest women organization in Kenya. It is a unique national women grassroots NGO with organization structures in every administrative unit in Kenya, over 17,000 elected leaders, and we have over 4 million members and about 25,000 affiliated women groups. The organization is managed from the headquarters by an elected National Steering Committee and a secretariat. The CEO is here and our team, ended from headquarters by the National Chairperson. Considering our large grassroots membership and presence, we give this submission as a representation of all our members and indeed the women of Kenya, and we do own the 2 women there, Mama Wabulianga and Mama Mnazi. You are our members, you are our sisters, and we are happy to have you there. We then thank the National Dialogue Committee, NADCO, for inviting us to give this presentation today as stakeholders, and we commend this committee for establishing this consultative process. Maendeleo indeed has been on record constantly calling for a national dialogue, because it is undeniable that dialogue and consultation among Kenyans is crucial for promotion of peace and national unity. We as mothers and custodians of the family will always call for dialogue, as we do in our homes. This submission is on behalf of then the team I've talked about, NSC, as I've introduced the members, the board, which is 58 members, basically 47 county chairs and 11 national officials. It is the biggest board, I'm sure, in this country. The annual general meeting, AGM, which is about 800 members and will be meeting later in the year. Message from our patron, Mama Phoebe Asio, who is abroad, and greetings from the acting patron, Mama Zibora Kitoni. So I go then straight to recommendations of the agenda set out by this committee. Number 1, electoral justice and related matters. Restructuring and reconstitution of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the IEBC. We support restructuring and reconstitution of IEBC and addressing gaps that we have identified as follows. Number 1, the Secretariat. The IEBC Secretariat should undergo capacity building given the sensitivity of their job. The Secretariat needs to win public confidence that is professional, inclusive, and impartial. IEBC Commissioners Selection Panel. The selection panel should be agreed upon by all players. It should be inclusive and open with the selection process, as well as commit to selecting highly competent commissioners that Kenyans have confidence in. I dare then say, Maendeleo has already presented itself. They wrote to us, the current team, and we gave our views. That is on record. Civic education. IEBC should be funded sufficiently and in a timely manner to educate the public on the election processes, which we feel was not conclusively done in the last 2 elections, 2017-2022. I am not even sure whether it was done properly in 2013. Boundaries delimitation. We recommend for boundaries delimitation to be carried out as constitutionally required, but ensure other aspects other than
population are taken into consideration, because what we normally hear, we only hear more about the numbers in some constituencies, and we do not hear ethnicity taken into consideration, geographical size, common interests, and history of marginalization. We are aware some are in the Constitution, but we want to emphasize. Remember, we are women and we are married cross-board, so we also have a bit of this information. Audit of the 2022 presidential election. We are on record many times calling for dialogue, as I've said, and now that this bipartisan team is already working, I am sure this committee will get a solution. Therefore, our feeling as a mother institution is we leave this matter to His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, CGH, President of the Republic of Kenya, Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, and the former Prime Minister, Raila Amolo Odinga, to now deal with that matter. Maendeleo views, we don't want to dig deep into that. In future, we therefore then recommend upcoming elections, we support an audit of the elections to be carried out within 3 months after inauguration of the elections. That then, within 3 months after inauguration, we can be done with auditing and the country can go back to work. Outstanding constitutional matters. Article 43 of the Constitution, the cost of living and related issues. Current economic situation has families struggling to meet daily needs due to high food prices and other basic needs and high unemployment. We therefore then give the following recommendation. We would appreciate a separation of matters to do with cost of living and politics, because cost of living is affected by other external factors, such as we had a prolonged drought. We even witnessed the war Ukraine just did not start, but we saw politics playing in. As mothers, we strongly speak out against our children being reduced to voters and wish to see them benefit from the votes they cast. We therefore recommend that county governments should spearhead job creation, as this was the intention of devolution, which Maendeleo was completely involved in, of resources to be utilized in poverty alleviation. This is how we can therefore address the presence of poverty in Kenya 60 years after independence. Promoting national unity and inclusivity in public appointments and adequate checks and balances. We give the following recommendations to address the issues of governance, impunity, and independent institutions, constitutionalism, and the rule of law in Kenya. We propose the following. Civic education programs that raise public awareness about the importance of good governance, the rule of law, and accountability. Incorporation and entrenchment of national values, and the women here, please hear us. Entrenchment of national values into school curriculums from an early age. What we are seeing today in values can only be healed if we start from the bottom, and therefore we hope that you can hear us here as mothers. Emulate institutions that are practical examples of inclusivity. For instance, Maendeleo here practices inclusivity in their models, and we have brought you all the documents. I think somebody should take them over for them to look at as we continue talking. Separation of governance and politics. Fidelity of political, or separation of governance and politics. Fidelity of political parties, coalitions, and law on multi-party democracy. I continue? Preventing interference with political parties stroke coalitions. Recommendation: enforce transparency and accountability measures for elected officials. Political parties requiring them to disclose their funding sources, expenditures, and activities to the public. Entrenching funds into the Constitution, the National Government Constituency Development Fund. We support the entrenchment of the National Government Constituency Development Fund and GCDF in the Constitution, and recommend the following changes. And those in front of us, many are MPs. So we recommend here, please, that ensure women representation in the CDF incorporating grassroots leaders such as Maendeleo Wanawake, right from the ward and other players, sub-counties or county chairs. Women in church, we have women in Mothers Union, very good leaders, women in the Catholic Women Association, the Women Guild, and even women in the mosque, our Muslim sisters. Retired teachers in their bursary committees. A practical example is Maendeleo chairs who sit in the county anti-corruption civilian oversight committees. We are in 40 counties, and we do a lot of work. The fund should address social issues such as teenage pregnancies and vulnerable children such as orphans. I dare say, and here as mothers, that our girls, we are number 3 in the world for girls giving birth at 13 years, and that then leaves them to be grandmothers at 26 years. That none of you want to see in your homes, even from your children. So we are asking for a lot of listening into this. The National Government Affirmative Action Fund, we support the entrenchment of the National Government Affirmative Fund, GAF, in the Constitution and recommend the following change. Engagement of grassroots leaders, women community leaders in programs supported this fund. My sisters who are in the women leadership, we want to feel the impact of the numbers we have, so that then the journey Maendeleo has worked for 70 years starts to get some fruits. The fund to address very specific issues like drug and substance abuse, and also the teenage pregnancies we are talking about. It is not nice to hear we are number 3 in the world. That talks about the country we are starting to be. The Senate Oversight Fund, we support the entrenchment of the Senate Oversight Fund in the Constitution because the Senate plays a critical role in overseeing funds allocated to counties, just like we have supported the other one. A constitutionally established Senate Oversight Fund would ensure that Senate has the necessary resources to fulfill its duties and effectively. The rider here, however, all these funds must have an impact at the grassroots. We must feel the results because we are all here based on the grassroots. Establishment and entrenchment of state offices, the office of the leader of the official opposition. We support establishment and entrenchment of the office of the official opposition for enhanced political stability and oversight of government. The office of the cabinet secretary, we too support establishment and entrenchment of the office of the prime cabinet secretary. Ensure effective service delivery and governance. Before I go to conclusion, I am sure I've not done 10 minutes. I then want to pose a question. On Monday, we were 12 years after we lost Professor Wangari Maathai, our very icon. In 2007, 2008, some of us were in that journey. She called us in our Green Belt movement, and I say this with absolute humility. It is not part of this document. But if I don't say it, we will not be doing justice to Professor Wangari Maathai. All of us in international forums, we talk about her. So what I pose for you here, this committee, is that when Professor called us 2007, 2008, it was during the Kofi Annan negotiating team which was going on in Serena. And she was there herself, the late patron, our patron, Mama Jane Kiano, Professor Jiko Kabira, this can be checked from her, Rose Waruhio, Enda Gashukia, and myself. And what Professor suggested to us is that Kenya needed a prime minister to avoid a lot of things we see going into the future. I rest my case. I do not want to say much, but having come from a woman of our structure who is not with us today, who talked to Kenyans about climate change and the world that we never had, today we see where we are. So using her again, I pose to say that came from her. And I think we need to throw it to you. We are mothers and we'll tell you with absolute truth and sincerity. In conclusion, in summary, Maendeleo therefore expresses appreciation for the National Dialogue Committee, endeavors and eagerly anticipates the committee's development of approaches that encourage positive political involvement, as well as the promotion of peace, reconciliation among the populace following the post-2022 general election polarization in the country and into the future. And with those many remarks, I thank you, and may the good Lord bless you.
Thank you very much,
to the chairperson and your team for a very concise presentation. We feel that our work is enriched by a very invaluable presentation. Unless there's any other question from our side, we shall be... Okay, Honorable Wambilanga.
Not really a question. Thank you so much, Chair. Just a comment. I want to commend the team for the recommendations that you have brought forth. We fully associate ourselves with, as actually me and my sister here, with your sentiments. Only that you are on the selection panel, you just said it has to be inclusive, and gave some other recommendations. But you didn't touch on the political part about this selection panel. Should it be political, or should politicians be involved? What is your take on that? And then also, on the audit of presidential elections, as female leaders of this country, I feel that it's important that you put in your take. What is your take? As much as you want to be non-partisan, I'm sure we have individual views which we would like to hear as a commission. Thank you.
We'll ask a number of questions, then you can answer all of them together. And maybe I could also pick up from where Honorable Mbilenga has left. And I thank you for your presentation. And I particularly like your idea of incorporating and entrenching national values into the school curriculums from an early age. And the inclusivity you speak about in Maendeleo. But we have also seen a clamor for what would in some quarters look like ethnic-based counties and constituencies in view of your proposal on inclusivity and entrenching national values in our school curricula. And also the fact that our children, many of our children now are not very attached as their parents are to their ethnicities. What would your view be in the establishment of those counties and constituencies that are more ethnic-based than anything? Then on the electoral reforms, I think Honorable Catherine has asked, maybe just to reinforce, would you prefer a selection panel mode of getting to reconstitute the IEBC Commission, or more of a political class-driven appointment process to reconstitute that selections panel? And on the audit of elections, you propose that audit of the elections to be carried out within 2 to 3 months after inauguration for the country to move on. Do you mean an audit of the election results or an audit of the electoral processes?
That seems to be all. That seems to be all. Please just answer in less than 3 minutes. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you on the questions. On political parties, my sister, Maendeleo is national, and you have heard the numbers. And as I sit here, our members are drawn basically from 47 counties. It's half and half. We are very careful in some pronouncements. If I come in camera, we can share with you. Allow me not to get deeper into that. We would not want the women to be more divided than we have been. We called for dialogue. We are old mothers. The people you see here are not young apart from these girls. Allow me not to go there, please. But in camera, I can come in. The audit 2022, I was also quite clear about that. We left the current 2022 to the leadership here, His Excellency the President and Prime Minister. Allow us not to go deeper into that because, as I have said, the reasons are very clear. National majority leaders talked about liking the values and the kids and the now counties which are more ethnic-based. I think we would be asking for you to agree with us. The details, we can, Mheshimiwa, work on them. We can produce you a paper in the next 24 hours, giving you the way we look at it, the details, because all those 47 counties have our members right to the ward. We have heard their voices, and most of these women are in charge, are in more. So if you allow us, we can present you a paper within the next 24 hours, and that will tell you, will give you an answer. On the selection panel of the mode, what we did not say was deliberate. It's not that we had not read the question. Allow us not to go there. Allow us not to go there. Here we want one country. When I see my brother there, Eugene Wamalwa, and I remember the journey is one nation, and we are here to tell you, we must move forward, God giving us grace as a nation. My sister, where I have not gone deep, I can give you a confidential letter. I used to be a government civil servant, a secretary. I can provide you a confidential letter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we shall now excuse you.
Before we wind up,
yes,
there is a call from the lady from Mombasa. We have something to say off cuff, and allow her just to say it. She has come all the way from Lamu, and the other leaders will have to talk for them.
Okay. Mimi nitakuwa as brief as possible. Kwanza natoa shukrani kwa serikali yetu vile imetufanyia Lamu. Nasikia Lamu, nasikia ile tunabandikwa hayafai, lakini ni ya urongo na kweli. Tunashukuru pia Mheshimiwa Kandi kwa kazi nzuri anayofanya on the ground. Anasikiliza, anaona, anachukua maoni. Kwa hivyo we are happy with that. Tunawaombea mbarikiwe. Kitu ambacho kimenichoma sana mimi mpaka nisema lazima nizungumze leo ni kuhusu mambo ya LGBT. Kwa kisisi tunaita kaumulut. Hassan anaweza kumkubaliana.
LGBTQ.
Hii ni kitu ambacho sisi wa mama wa Coast, wa Lamu, na hata nadhani hawa mama walioko hapa wote, hakuna mtu atakubali mambo kama haya. Mtoto wake amezaliwa dume wa kuchunga mji, na tunawatahidi tunafanya celebrations na ceremonies, alafu kesho mwambie ageuzwe akuwe mwanamke. Sidhani kama hiyo itawezekana na hatupendelei. Sijui kama kuna kina mama hapa, hata nyinyi ambao mko hapo, hata nyinyi mababa,
pia wanaume.
Nataka dume yako alafu kesho apige piga.
Asante. Asante.
Alafu kitu kingine ni kwamba wacha niongeze kidogo tafadhali, ni muhimu. Tafadhali. Mungu mwenyewe hakuwa mjinga. Saila alisema aumbe mwanamke, Mungu hakuwa mjinga. Kwa hivyo sisi pia tufuate zile dini zetu zimetufundisha na mila. Si tukubali maneno tu ya ugeni, kisha kuna side effects haya maneno. Unajua mtoto si kupiga kiuno peke yake, hata anavaa pad, unajua? Anaharibika, anapata infection. Wanawake wanapata mpaka makansa. Kweli tunataka watoto wetu tumezaa, tumelea, tumewasomesha, kesho tuwe na mambo kama haya jamani? Mimi napinga kabisa mambo ya LGBT, naomba na nyinyi nyote mpinge kama mimi. Hawa watoto wetu warimeni madume. Hasa ni pia wewe na watoto wa dume, warimeni dume. Hakuna mambo ya kuuza watoto.
Asante sana. Asante sana. Now we shall excuse
for those mumesikia mama kwa niaba ya mama wamesikia kwa niaba ya patron wetu Mama Phoebe Asio, who is out of the country on medical grounds, acting patron Mama Zibora Kitoni, the entire board, the entire membership, and the team here. We wish you well, and we are looking forward for very successful negotiations. We continue being on our knees to pray for you. This is one country. We do not have another one. May the good Lord bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have the NCIC come forward.
Oh.
Kindly assist them to disengage, please.
NCIC.
In the interest of time. Salimiana baadaye tafadhali.
Or Dr. Mutumbo if he's quicker. Aya, karibuni, Chairperson NCIC and your commissioners. I think I'll do a quick introduction. From my right, Honorable Amina from Kilifi County, Malende. Mheshimiwa Eugene Wamalwa, I'm sure you all know him. My co-chair, temporary, the deputy delegation leader, Honorable Pio Wandai. Mheshimiwa Senator Omar, Mheshimiwa Catherine Wambilianga, and co-chair Kimani Shongwa. We have apologies from our co-chair, who will be joining us in the afternoon, His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka, Governor Cecily Mbarire, and Senator Aaron and Senator Mugani, who are in Turkana County. Karibuni, if you can do the same quick introduction, Chairperson, and go straight to your presentation in less than 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair and co-chair and members of this bipartisan national dialogue. With me are all the commissioners. On my immediate right is Wambui Nyutu, who is the vice chair of the commission. Next to her is Engineer Philip Okundi, and Sam Corner at the other end. And on my left, we have Dr. Danivas Makori. We have Honorable Dorcas Kedogo, and we have Honorable Farah. And then we have the CEO, the acting CEO, and the secretary to the commission. So that is that's the team that we have. First of all, we want to congratulate you on being entrusted with such responsibility. The whole country and even beyond Kenya are looking up to you, and therefore we wanted to really say that we wish you well, because the outcome of this process is going to be extremely important for this country. Thank you for your invitation. We were invited and asked to come to make an oral presentation, and we were asked to make that presentation based on the 5 areas of issues that you are dealing with.
And Chairman, maybe if you have another copy of the document you are reading, you could share with our secretary to make copies for us.
Chair, we are making an oral presentation, as I say, but we have copies that will make copies for you. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So what we decided to do, Chair, because we were asked to address either all of the 5 issues or some of them. Our decision was to address only some of them, and that these are the ones that we consider to be relevant to our work. And there are 5 main issues that we have identified that we wanted to present. Number 1 is the issues related to structural inequalities, because this is what led to the problem of 2007-2008 conflicts, which led to the formation of, among others, the short-term TJRC through the Justice and Reconciliation Commission. And that was from the National Dialogue and Reconciliation Agreement of 1st February 2008. And then following that, the TJRC did its work, presented its report and recommendations, but then it was found that it was necessary to have a more long-term commission to continue to address the issues that led the country into what has been the worst type of elections-related conflicts and violence in this country. And that is how the NCIC was formed. And so that is why we feel, Chair, that addressing structural inequalities and disputes that were addressed by TJRC, but have not been resolved. And our understanding is that the report and the recommendations of the TJRC now lie with Parliament. We wanted to recommend here that this report be now acted upon, and Parliament has that responsibility. And as NCIC, we consider ourselves as the most natural successor to TJRC on long-term basis, and we are ready to implement those recommendations, because unless and until those recommendations are implemented, we will continue to have the problems that led to that problems continue. Secondly, and related to that, Chair, is the issue of historical grievances and unresolved issues, especially to do with the land, to do with the boundaries, the boundary disputes, and which, although had been addressed in the TJRC report, have not been implemented. And the historical marginalization, which devolution clearly has addressed but not adequately, also continue to be an issue related to historical grievances. And we know, Chair, that this is what led to the need for equalization fund, and this has done very well in terms of addressing the historical grievances, but it has not adequately addressed it. We also wanted to say that related to funds, that what has been already seen here as the need for, and you have it as item number 4, entrenching funds into the Constitution. We wanted to add to this that the constitutional commissions and independent offices should also be funded in a way that is entrenched in the Constitution. And in the same breath, we recommend strongly that the NCI Act, which created the NCIC, should be anchored in the Constitution. And it is that way that if the funding then is also assured, then our work, which I must say is very much affected by lack of sufficient funding, that also will be addressed, because we feel very strongly that funding that for our commission especially, we are only funded for recurrent budget. As far as the work of peace building and other related work is concerned, this is mostly funded through donor money. And we feel that the work that we do in peace building is so important that its funding should not be left to the donors. In fact, our submission here is that what is considered as hardware and software in dealing with the conflicts, hardware, of course, being done by armed forces, but the software which follows and which ensures lasting peace is not funded sufficiently. And we feel that Exchequer should fund it, and it should be considered as part of the national values and ethos of Article 10, and that it is actually to do with the sovereignty of this country. And therefore, just as it has been recommended here to have the funding of national government constituencies, national government affirmative action, and the Senate Oversight Fund, we should also, and here the funding of constitutional commissions and independent offices should be included. The third area, Chair, is to do with the implications of youth unemployment. We wanted to present this, Chair, here because in the hotspots mapping that NCIC did in the run-up to the elections, our findings were, in some cases, really very worrying in that the proliferation of armed gangs in this country is not given adequate attention. And particularly because we now have thousands of very well-educated young people who are unemployed. And they are using their knowledge. Some of them are scientists, others are biologists, etc., chemists. And that is important to recognize that the nature and even, if I would call it, the quality of the violence that these gangs are doing is now beyond what is traditionally seen as the problem of youth. We realized that if we look at this, then youth unemployment is a time bomb which, if not addressed adequately, will clearly lead to this country exploding. It is for that reason, therefore, we wanted to say that we address the issue of youth and unemployment in a way that any funding that would be used in this, including the funding of, as we have said, the constitutional commissions, and particularly in our case, NCIC, we are very much involved in this work that we feel when adequately funded, we will deal with the issue of youth unemployment. The fourth issue is what we call the national architecture for peace building and cohesion. I would say that when you consider the peace building in this country, the arena of peace builders, if you wish, and peacemakers is both congested and contested. And unless there is proper coordination at the national level, then it remains that because many of these, some of them are briefcase peacemakers and peace builders, and there is even contradiction in what is being done by different bodies, including state actors and non-state actors. When it comes to state actors alone, we see that there is, the NSC, the Small Arms Committee, the NCIC itself, and many others, and not to talk of civil society organizations who have taken it upon themselves to do peace building. And unless this is well coordinated at the level at the national level, where there is a clear understanding of who is doing what, where, and how, then it means that peace building could itself be a source of conflict. And that is why we feel that the coordination at the national level is absolutely critical, because this will therefore also lead to addressing the issues of Article 10 of the Constitution. Now, for this to happen, certainly there has to be well-funded commissions and institutions that are doing that work. In our work, we have seen that peace dividends are critical. A good example here is what happened only last week in Samburu. For the last half a year, Chair, we have been addressing the issue of Moranism, and we have reached a point where we launched a program of Warani SME groups, starting with Samburu, and we are cooperating with the Ministry of Cooperatives to address this issue, because what the Morans said is they will leave the cattle rustling and banditry only if they have alternative means of livelihood. And alternative means of livelihood can actually be provided for, and the ministry has assured us that they will do just that. That is why I'm bringing the issue of peace dividends here, because once they form themselves in groups, then they will be funded, they will leave banditry and cattle rustling, and this will resolve one of the outstanding triggers of violence and conflicts in this country. We also have another example, Chair, of how peace dividends can be handled. And this is the cooperation, again, between peace and development in the Amaya Triangle, where Baringo, Samburu, Laikipia, and Isiolo came together. And we consider this as a model of how regions can come together and be able to make the best of the funds like equalization fund that we have referred to. And therefore, we want to recommend that, again, coming to software, the interface between software and hardware. Fifth and finally, Chair, is the issue of boundaries. In our work, we have come to realize that out of the 47 counties, that 3 have boundary disputes. That 3 counties have boundary disputes. And we want to say that the processes that are addressing the existing issues should be taken into account when it comes to delimitation of boundaries. The delimitation of boundaries, which will be done by IBC, should be done in such a way that it will not exacerbate the existing boundary disputes or deepen structural inequalities or lead to violent conflicts among communities. It is in this way that we as NCIC would like to look at the issue of boundaries. And these boundaries are part of what we are calling structural inequalities. We know that from history in this country, it was a policy of colonial government to create a landed class and a landless class, the Swinnerton Plan, those who would remember this. And this, unfortunately, was not adequately handled by the independent Kenya, because even the session paper of number 10 of 1965, although it had done very well, it actually did not address the issue of structural inequalities, inequalities that were created by government as a matter of policy. It is for that reason, therefore, Chair, we feel that we will need now to address this issue and avoid further problems that can actually be resolved. And we look forward very much to the findings and report of this committee to really address those issues, because unless and until these problems that we have identified are addressed, then we will continue to experience violent conflicts, and this country will not be peaceful and united and cohesive as we would like it to be. Thank you, Chair, and I think I have stayed within the time that you gave me. We will, as I have said, provide a text for the Secretariat on
Thank you, Chair.
Orally.
Maybe if I will be the first one to go, just from where you've ended on matters cohesion and boundaries. we have seen a number of representations, people asking for counties in the delimitation of boundaries, some constituencies that are, in some views, largely ethnic-based. What would your view be in the establishment of new constituencies or new county boundaries that are largely along ethnic lines? Omar?
Chairman Ribu, my first question is, in your own estimation, has there been any much progress made in terms of healing the ethnic divisions we have in this country? Because even as we go into politics, we see the SI unit of political mobilization is largely ethnic groups. So I just want to appreciate your appreciation of how much progress you have made since the establishment of the NCIC, not just your term and even the terms of others. In terms of the clear line between hate speech and freedom of speech is quite a thin one. I remember once NCIC did a report which I found extremely insightful, and I was at that time at the NCHR, so I used that report into an article, and I was very happy that the same, then one of the members of parliament, then, no, he was a PNU activist, was now a minister for trade, complained to the NCIC that I had committed the act of hate speech. Actually, Chalo investigated that case and cleared me of any wrongdoing because it was the NCIC report that I was citing. At what point must we be audacious in terms of addressing our ethnic configurations? I think Kenyans try to sanitize a lot of things. We must sometimes be able to appreciate speech no matter how much we dislike of it. If you look at the Trump administration, it is largely about white supremacy, but it doesn't, that's the strength of democracy. I should be able to stand up and sometimes pinpoint the problem as it is. The only good thing that supported me at that time was the fact that it was based on an NCIC report of the Kibaki administration, that Kibaki's appointments and hitherto that point were extremely skewed, in fact, not only regional, but very Nyeri. The third one, in terms of structural, systematic marginalization and exclusion. I'm one of those who always claims to have systematic marginalization and exclusion, like Commissioner Farah there probably is there for the same reason. But how is there a programmatic way of handling it? Because when you elevate me, you usually sometimes just say that you've elevated me, pulled me out of marginalization, but left the rest of the community there. So I see that a lot with the minority and marginalized groupings. I see a plethora of appointments that go to individuals, but I never see those communities necessarily pulling themselves out of marginalization. Do you have a programmatic strategy so that we can then appreciate better? And do you think that this systematic or systemic abuses, marginalization, alienation are the reasons why there's this violent elections or contestation for power and the fallout? And how much have you done in terms of trying to address that by way of advisory to government?
Amina?
Thank you, Chair. I'm reading here one of the mandates of NCIC. The mandate is to facilitate and promote equality of opportunity, good relations, harmony, and peaceful coexistence between persons of different ethnic, religious, and racial communities of Kenya, and to advise the government on all aspects thereof. I think that is true, right? So my question for you will be on the issue of national unity. We have had serious claims of shareholding in government, public appointments, and development in the country. What is NCIC doing about it, and what advice would you give the government?
Right. I think that should be it. Eugene, you have something?
Yes.
One last
allow Eugene to...
Thank you. I think just picking up from what Honorable Amina has said, under Article 131(2) of our Constitution, the president is supposed to be the symbol of national unity. And not just a symbol, it is his cardinal duty to ensure national unity. And the deputy president is supposed to be the principal assistant in that regard. Looking at this election that has just ended, the country was divided right in the middle. Half of the country went yellow for Kenya Kwanza, the other half went blue for Azimio. And after the elections, instead of dialoguing, we went to the streets. We are here because of the initiative between our two principals of the two coalitions, who said, no, let us not sort out this matter on the streets. Let us sit and talk to each other instead of talking at each other. What Amina is asking is where we have the principal deputy actually undermining these very talks and talking the language of division instead of unity, which is the principal duty to ensure national unity, and the country being a country of shareholders and non-shareholders. If we were to go that way, half of the country will be shareholders, the other half will be non-shareholders. What have you done, particularly and specifically with the utterances made by the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua? Not once, repeatedly. We haven't heard from you. And if you have taken steps, would like to know from you what those steps are.
Okay. Just one comment. Chairman Reverend Kobia, I've known you since the Mfungamano days. Are you sure you really want to implement the TGFC report?
Thank you. Let's have the responses, please. If we could have them in under 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me, I would like to ask some the commissioners to address some of this. I would like, on the issue of constituencies, Commissioner Danvers Makori, to take that up. That came especially when it comes to the demarcation and all that, and whether, you know, the healing and reconciliation has taken place, and how the boundaries could be ethnicized. I think that's the point that he wrote. Then I'll have Commissioner Sam Corner to address the issue of systemic and structural marginalization that was asked by Honorable Hassan. And the question of Honorable Amina on the mandate and the addressing and advising the government on issues of national unity, which has been expanded by Honorable Eugene Wamalo, Commissioner Farah to take that up in that order, so that, and we have 2 minutes each, it seems. But
1 minute each, actually. Let's proceed.
Okay, those are the questions that came, and to Commissioner Honorable Hassan, yes, from Mfungamano, yes, we certainly would want to implement the TJRC recommendations, really because we feel that unless we are bold enough, we take the courage to address them, however difficult, and I know they'll be divisive, but we are prepared. And that's why we are asking to be enabled financially to address it, because it will be a contribution to the national unity and the cohesion of this country.
Yes, in any order, please. Just proceed.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I think I will mention something about the question of reconciliation as a country. And I'll begin by saying the story of reconciliation has been a sad story of missed opportunities. I said missed opportunities because at the time the former late President Mwai Kibaki was elected in 2002, that was a moment for Kenya to cohere and for the leadership to look at the country and create opportunities for people to reconcile. We missed that opportunity. We missed an opportunity in 2007 when the Kofi Annan Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation process gave us the 4 agenda items, which if we had pursued them sustainably and consistently, Kenya would not be at the state we are in now. We missed an opportunity in 2013 when the current president, William Ruto, and Uhuru Kenyatta came together. That was a moment for Kenya even to reconcile the Kikuyus and the Kalenjins and for the rest of the country to be brought forward. And of course, we had the TJRC report, another missed opportunity. We missed another opportunity in BBI. The current National Dialogue Committee, this particular committee, is a moment again for Kenya to be courageous enough and confront the past. But I want to say the reason why we've missed those opportunities is because when a moment comes for us to engage in reconciliation, it is only important if the politicians are unhappy. I want to say every day, including today, there are Kenyans who will die because of violence, just the same way Kenyans die during maandamano or protest. There are Kenyans who are protesting their conditions or their situation. But so long as the politicians are happy, we don't take the feelings of Kenyans as important. So all these national processes end when the politicians share the cake and they are comfortable. That's why we are saying it's a sad story of missed opportunities. It's a sad story. It only becomes important if the politicians are unhappy, but the people of Kenya are hurting every day. The people of Kenya have grievances that they want their leadership to take them heads on and with courage so that we can move forward as a country. Because so long as we have grievances, so long as you have people who are feeling they are not part of the processes, it is very difficult for Kenya to move forward. So we need to take the agenda of reconciliation, the agenda of cohesion, as a national conversation, not a political process that begins and ends with the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. On the question of delineation, new constituencies, and the counties where they're ethnic, or they're drawing ethnic lines, it's true, actually. This is a reality. First of all, by law, our constitution is supposed to unite our country. And when we gave ourselves a new constitution, especially in the revolution, we were supposed to, as much as celebrate diversity, be one nation. The reality is, if you look at even just the basic countries that are there, starting from the north to the south, they're named after ethnic groups. Implicitly, what you're saying is exclusive to that. And that's why we have the conflict raging in Kerio Valley, Suguta Valley, is because you have counties, county belongs to this ethnic group vis-a-vis. Our proposal as NCIC, given that we work extensively in these regions, is first of all to rename some of these counties, to move away from ethnic identities, because this is what actually is taking our country back instead of forward. Secondly, in the delineation that IBC is supposed to do by law, it must be done with a lot of consultation, and especially of the 290 constituencies. If you look at them, close to 70% are still within ethnic lines or clan lines, so amplifying ethnicity and tribalism. So for us, they need to be withdrawn so that there's no exclusivity, but inclusivity in all these counties. Thank you very much.
Finally?
Before finally, we can allow one lady to speak.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. I was given the most hot potato to respond to, but thank you, Chairman, for doing that, because you know I'm a politician and really I don't fear. I will say what is in my head. The mandate of the NCIC, vis-a-vis what the Deputy President has said about the shareholding, and what we have done as NCIC about it. We have done nothing about it, and I think we will not do anything about it, because the context of the statement is where I sit is about government sharing. It's not about the country per se, but it is common
practice all over the world that any government that comes to power shares power and positions with the people who supported that government mostly. And that is where he's coming from, the deputy president. And so it is world over.
You're actually right.
In America.
He explained that to you, or this your interpretation?
Well, as a commission,
you're actually right.
I'm talking from practice and what is in the world. And me and you, Mheshimiwa Wandai, know that even in America, Mr. Biden has shared his government with the people who supported him. He has appointed his ambassadors and everybody and from his backyard and the people who are with his party. And that's where the deputy president is coming from. As NCIC, we must be very careful on where we touch. So therefore, it is not about the national unity. You can see the president and the deputy president being everywhere in this country. They are in Luo Nyanza, where my friend Wandai comes from. He is in Northeastern. He is in the coast. The president and the deputy president are trying to stitch the country together in their policy. But this is about how the government position is shared. That is where I put that case and to rest. Of course, the president is a symbol of unity. No doubt about it. And that's what he's doing it every day. That's why he's taking projects to all corners of this country. That's why he's sleeping in some counties. That's why he's taking the cabinet meeting in so many counties in this country. And therefore, the issue should be looked into the lens of government construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very in-depth explanation.
I think we need to conclude now.
Yeah.
Just conclude, please. Yeah. Just conclude.
One more, Chair. The issue of hate speech versus freedom of expression, the Vice Chair, Wambui Nyutu, will answer it.
Thank you very much to the co-chairs. The question on freedom of speech versus hate speech, I think it lies right into the Constitution, Article 33, that gives every Kenyan the freedom of expression, the freedom to seek and impart information, as well as academic knowledge. But at the same time, the same Constitution limits the rights of freedom of expression, and it limits it to incitement to violence, propaganda for war, and all other aspects of expressions that may lead to war in the country. So we know hate speech is any utterance. Hate speech, according to our definition, is any utterance that may lead to, ethnic polarization and incitement to violence and any war in the country. So it is very clear in the Constitution the difference between hate speech and freedom of expression. Thank you very much.
Well, with that, then, chairs, we wanted to really say just one point to inform you that we have just concluded doing ethnic audit on employment of the counties. And in another 2 weeks, we'll be releasing our findings. Then we would want also to do ethnic audit at the national level, the national government. And then after that, we'll do national cohesion index. These are very important because they are the indicators of where we are when it comes to cohesion, when it comes to unity, and particularly because of the findings, the basic findings of ethnic audit of the counties when it comes to employment, we are actually retrogressed. It was better when we did the last audit 4 years ago, and this is something that we'll be bringing up.
Can you share that report once it's launched with us, and even recommendations as to how you can enforce some kind of ethnic balance in terms of appointments? Because that's a report. How do you enforcement? If there was an enforcement regime, people would not do it.
Yes, Mheshimiwa, we will share it with this committee once it is out, and it includes what we have recommended to be done in order to alleviate the situation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. We shall now excuse you. Our next group, please.
Our next group is Dr. Mutubwa. You two, at least now I know you. I've heard so much about you. Now at least I've heard you. Yeah. Asante sana, Reverend. Pray for us. Daktari, I believe you know the members here.
Yes, I know most of them.
That's Honorable Amina Nyazi, MP Malindi. That's Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, member of this committee. That's Honorable Catherine Wambilianga, Women Rep Bungoma, and also a member of this committee. There is apologies from Governor Cecily Mbarire, who is attending to some event on the Tourism Week in Embu. There's apologies from the two senators, the majority leader in the Senate, and Honorable Senator Aaron Cheriot and Honorable Omugeni. The Deputy President will be joining us later today, who is the delegation leader on that other side. I'm sitting in myself for Honorable Kimani Shungwa, who has just stepped out for business in Parliament. I am Hassan Umar, member of IALA, and our able co-chair today, who's also the deputy leader of the delegation from Azimio, is Honorable Pio Andai, who's also the minority leader. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
And if we can restrict ourselves to the 20 minutes and then some interaction. I think the letter was explicit.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief. First, I want to thank the committee for inviting me. My name is Dr. Wilfred Mutubwa. I have put in my contribution in writing, dated 8 September 2023. I have addressed 3 thematic areas based on my background. I am an academic. I have also interacted with the electoral process, representing parties in election petitions, and also as a member of the Political Parties Disputes Tribunal. The views I give, Chairman, are personal, my personal views, based on my understanding of the law and based on my understanding of the circumstances under which this committee is looking at these matters. Chairman and members, the
delegation you're having?
These are my associates.
Okay.
Yes, I will introduce them. This is Eric, Madam Kijala, and Mr. Joel. Those are all my students and associates in the office. Thank you very much. I will be very brief, Mr. Chairman. My contribution is in the area of the entrenchment of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary and some contributions on the area of electoral law reform. Mr. Chairman and members, the beginning point is to say that when we gather here in such an occasion, we are really taking an introspective view of our nationhood and our constitutional framework with a view to understand, number one, our legal history and our political culture. Mr. Chairman, my first proposal in terms of the entrenchment of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary is founded on the understanding of our political history, our legal culture, and the framework within which we operate currently, the governance structure and the electoral system. Chairman, the long and short of my presentation on that particular aspect is to suggest that the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, in essence, in an abstract view, has been with us for a long time. In fact, if you psychoanalyze the processes that we have gone through, and I heard the team before me speaking about it, 2008 constitutional amendment under the National Code. Previously, in various forms, we have had the semblance of this office in actual fact and not always necessarily in a legal structured way. So, Chairman, the suggestion that I have put forth is to say that the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary is an office that in itself is one of the offices that have been set out in our Constitution, though not in very express terms. When I read the Constitution Article 152 and I look at the Constitution of the Cabinet itself, there is reference to Cabinet Secretaries without specific reference to the Prime Cabinet Secretary. So the question has always been, where exactly is this office located in the architecture of our governance system? And Chairman and members, my view is that the Prime Cabinet Secretary's position need not be entrenched in the Constitution by way of an amendment of the Constitution. The challenge we have had as a country in terms of framing our Constitution and legislative drafting is that we are too prescriptive, perhaps a reflection of our own insecurities in terms of drafting legislation and constitutions. So that, in a sense, whenever we take time to draft legislation or even draft the Constitution, we are anticipating, always anticipating difficulties. The view I take is that in drafting constitutional provisions, you have a framework. You have a general principle approach to governance. And when you look at the manner in which this constitution is framed, the Office of Cabinet Secretaries is an office that is open in terms of the persons that will occupy the offices and the various dockets that will be created. However, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, in my view, the Prime Cabinet Secretary is simply a first among equals. A first among equals is somebody who occupies a position not necessarily outside the framework that already exists, but a first among equals. An office that, for instance, if you look at the Constitution, it does not say that the President will appoint a Minister for Agriculture. But there is a Cabinet Secretary, 24 maximum, and you will see that the discretion is left to the appointing authority to appoint such person. And I think when we look at our political history, one of the things that stands out is that the Constitution creates power, then disperses the powers, and creates checks and balances. What I have noticed, and what many scholars will tell you, is that in our setting, the disbursement of power is more or less usually done in a horizontal rather than vertical way. Because horizontally, you bring more people on the table, there is a feeling of inclusion, there is a feeling of participation, and there is therefore generally a sense of belonging in the state. And to say that this horizontal disbursement of power would only, in the executive seat, in the office of the President and Cabinet Secretaries, is to suggest that perhaps the way we have agreed to govern ourselves is to have a clear hierarchical order of leadership. But this office presents a unique opportunity because one of the things I see as an advantage, and looking at what the Tanzanians have, for instance, and the Ugandans, although the Ugandan Prime Minister is actually a member of Parliament, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, the Prime Minister, is actually a person who is an executive, a chief executive. We have had comments in our system, or in our system of governance, that the President is a vision carrier. He is also the chief executive. He is also the implementing agency, and perhaps it would have been a bit more useful for the President to have a CEO, a person that can actually do the nuts and bolts. When you look at the Ugandan constitution, for instance, and the Tanzanian constitution, this is the office of the Prime Minister, or our equivalent of cabinet, Prime Cabinet Secretary, is a person who runs government, is the CEO who reports to the vision carrier, the person who has the mandate of the people. He may not possess popular mandate by election, but he's a person who can be appointed to participate in the running of government as a chief executive on behalf of the president, with the ultimate responsibility being with the president. And you look at when you look at the provisions in the Tanzanian constitution and the Ugandan constitution, the suggestion is that the prime minister is the person who conducts the day-to-day running of government, and the president therefore has the overall conduct of running government, but through this very specific office that has that function. In our context, the question has always been, do we need to amend the constitution to anchor this particular office in that constitution? Now, as I said, the office of Prime Cabinet Secretary is an office of Cabinet Secretary. Just like you would have Prime Cabinet Secretary, you would have Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, but he is a first among equals appointed within the same context of the constitutional provision under Article 152. I do not subscribe to the view that the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary will of necessity require a constitutional amendment. And I want to draw an analogy with the judiciary, how it works in the judiciary. We have the President of the Court of Appeal. It's not a constitutional office. He's a first among equals. The President of the Court of Appeal is a statutory office under a constitutional statutory, a constitutional legislation. A constitutional legislation, as we understand it, is a legislation that gives effect to a constitutional provision. So it is almost read as though or together with the Constitution. And when you have an office created by legislation through a statutory legislation that finds anchorage in a constitutional provision, my view is that that provision sits properly within our constitutional framework. And there are many decisions in that respect. So my view is that the manner of entrenchment of this office is simple, by way of legislation, and this legislation is anchored on the Constitution, and borrowing from many other practices, including our own here. We have the principal judge in the Land and Environment Court. So perhaps it is time for us to have some legislation in terms of the organization of the executive organs of government, and particularly the office of the cabinet secretaries. And that is where you will find that the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary can be properly designated in terms of the functions.
Something like Cabinet Secretaries Act.
Absolutely, something like that. Or yes, or some general organization of the executive arm of government in a legislation that is anchored in the Constitution. That is my.
As you continue, sorry.
Yes.
You didn't touch on the vertical dispersal of power.
Yes.
I was keen to.
Yes, the dispersal of power is deliberately vertical in the executive because of the possibility of conflict or overlapping responsibilities. However, I was saying that in the context of arguments which I have had, that to elevate the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary into a constitutional office may create an untidy situation where there is conflict with the Deputy President, for instance. But when you look at comparative jurisdictions in other places, there is absolutely no cause for worry. We have Deputy Presidents who coexist perfectly in a constitutional setting, in a Republican or democratic system, with a Deputy President. Now, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, in my view, would be coordinator of government business, for instance, would be chair of cabinet subcommittees because he's a cabinet secretary, while the Deputy President remains the principal assistant of the President. And the constitutional implications of presidency versus the Prime Cabinet Secretary can also be seen in terms of constitutional succession of the President. So there is a clear demarcation of the roles, and statute helps to only speak in details to those ones. I hope that is clarified.
And please, we are not doing very well on time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will not touch on the other ones. I have actually captured them in writing. My experience has been, one of the things I have suggested is a repeal of Article 88.4E of the Constitution. 88.4E, for simple reasons. There is an overlap in the mandate of the IEBC and the Political Parties Tribunal, which has been problematic ever since we promulgated this constitution. Now, there are two forums for resolution of pre-election disputes, the IEBC itself and the Political Parties Tribunal. What we have experienced for the last 13 years is what is called forum shopping. Now, forum shopping is aided by the vague provisions in the statute creating the Political Parties Tribunal and the Constitution. Now, the PPDT is the Kriegler Compromise Election Court. In fact, the proposal was to have a completely different election court from the ordinary courts, because you remember, people were very low on confidence in terms of confidence in our ordinary judicial system to deal with election disputes. Now, the conflict is this way. You find that the IEBC has to determine disputes between complainants and officers of the IEBC, because the complaint would always be that the returning officer has done or failed to do this. Now, the returning officer is actually an employee of the commission, and you need an arbiter that is independent and impartial. You cannot have a judicial system where one is a judge of his own cause, and that is the difficulty that is created.
In pre-election, how does IBC become returning officer?
Absolutely, because the disputes that go to the IBC regard the nomination of candidates. The nomination of candidates is the preserve, is a function of the IBC. If you return your papers to a returning officer and you have a dispute with a returning officer because he thinks you are not a Kenyan citizen, for instance, your forum of dispute resolution is before the IBC. And the disputant is yourself, the candidate, and an officer of the IBC, before commissioners of the IBC, resolving nomination disputes because of challenges which you allege are against the IBC. The point is to take these disputes away from the IBC. Whether you take them to the Political Parties Tribunal or take them to the High Court, the idea is to find a forum that has independence in the true sense of the word, and not just cosmetic, saying that these are commissioners. An institution cannot be a judge of its own processes in an impartial process, judicial process. That is the thinking. We have put it down in writing. We have suggested the ways it can be done. And because of the pressure of time, I will not go into the details. Thank you.
One question.
Yes, sir.
You talk about security of tenure of the PCS.
Yes.
The irony of that is that you want the president to appoint somebody to run the affairs of his government, and you actually had said that the political authority is the vision holder, is the president.
Yes, absolutely.
Appoints a PCS, who then somehow within his cabinet assumes the security of tenure. Don't you think that is a bit of a political folly?
Politically, it may be folly.
Just note down.
Yes, okay, so let me take the questions then. Okay.
I mean,
but I like the suggestion that if in the event the constitutional way is difficult, then we can create a cabinet act or something of that nature and provide for the prime cabinet secretary.
Very well, thank you.
Okay, now, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
I was waiting for him to finish. Okay. Now, back to the issue of prime cabinet secretary.
Yes.
And you will recall that even the Azimio coalition had a proposal to that effect prior to the elections. In fact, we called it the chief cabinet secretary. Same things, really. But then this one, we had not envisaged that we would have it entrenched in the Constitution at all. But now this idea, now that we need to entrench this position of chief cabinet secretary in the Constitution, is being interpreted in some quarters as simply a way of rewarding individual, of securing the position of Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, for instance. And in a sense, it is causing serious friction between the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi and the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua.
That's presumptive.
Yes, yes, for sure, yes. And to an extent, that is being to an extent, the incessant outbursts of Honorable Gachagua casting aspersions or castigating this talk is attributable to that mere fact that the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi's position is being entrenched in the Constitution and thereby watering down the influence, power, and prestige of the office of the Deputy President. What's your take on that, as a scholar of high repute, Dr. Mutobwa?
Yes. Dr. Mutobwa, and then as you respond to my brother on some of those matters that are presumptive, I also wanted, you have no opinion on the entrenchment of the office of the official opposition leader?
All right. Are those all the questions? Thank you for those questions. I will want to start with Honorable Wandai's question. I am not a politician. I do not understand the intricacies. We basically are speaking to the mechanics of state and how state power is shared and how it is managed. The Honorable Musalia Mudavadi is an individual. He is holding the office. The offices created in the Constitution are for perpetuity. We hope that the offices cannot be equated to the individual holding them for the time being. However, the politics of the day is for politicians to talk about. But my thinking is that the seeming tension between the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Deputy President, in a manner of looking at the framework in the statute, in fact, is a more justification why a statute may be useful in delimiting those functions properly. But even more importantly is an office that has the ability to improve delivery of service, coordination of cabinet functions, cannot be, you cannot say you do not want that office simply because a current political arrangement does not favor that kind of thinking. I do not think that the thinking around the Azimio or the Kenya Kwanza entrenchment or creation of a chief cabinet secretary or prime cabinet secretary was meant to entrench a certain individual. In fact, it was meant to create a situation, an appreciation of the political culture in the country, that the more power is dispersed horizontally, the better for everybody than it is vertically, because it creates an impression, even if it is only for optics, that there is inclusion in the affairs of state. That is my thinking. Now, the other question asked by Honorable Omar, security of tenure, a very difficult one, because it is difficult to prescribe security for tenure for one cabinet secretary and not the others. But this is a political conversation to have. My suggestion was that, look, for one to be effective in a role almost that of a head of public service and a CEO of the state on behalf of the president, a person who will be held accountable by the appointing authority, there must be some way in which that person wakes up in the morning knowing that he has a job, and the job can only be taken in certain circumstances prescribed by law. And those circumstances will be prescribed in statute, and he will have an opportunity to also be heard on certain accounts if at all he has taken the job. That's my view. On the question of the leader of official opposition, some people think that the system of government we run today may not necessarily be one that favors the office of the official opposition, leader of opposition. And the thinking is that the leader of official opposition should be in parliament. It's a fallacy. The contribution in terms of opposition debates, checking the government of the day, does not have to happen within the House of Parliament. But indeed, the leader of official opposition is very well represented in Parliament. And the leader of official opposition is an office. And if it's an office created or entrenched in the Constitution, it does not have to give that individual a seat in either Senate or National Assembly for him to be effective, but create structures around the office that would allow him to rally his troops in Parliament, appoint shadow cabinet secretaries, for instance, and articulate his position from a podium where he has facilitation. I do not think that the leader of official opposition is only a preserve. It is a thinking that is informed by experience and other situations. However, we are also able to craft our own approach to opposition involvement in government. The manner in which you craft that particular office, in my view, may involve the leader himself not being in either of the houses, but also leading troops in the house and also being able to make certain appointments within the legislative arms of government. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can you write a small thing on the leader of official position and submit to us, and just give us your internalization?
Yes.
Of if he's out of Parliament.
Yes.
What are his roles apart from appointing shadow cabinet secretaries, blah blah blah.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we shall excuse you now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
and thanks to you too. Now we have the Turkana Professional.
Please come forward. The
Association.
Turkana Professional Association. Come forward, please.
They're doing very well. Basra, I didn't know you are Turkana. You're from Turkana County. Basra was my college mate. Just to run you on a quick round of introductions, that's Honorable Amina Mnyazi, MP Malindi, and a member of this committee. The Honorable Kongo Mugeni, the Senator from Nyamira, and a member of this committee. The Honorable Catherine Wambilianga, the Bungoma Women Representative, and a member of this committee. We have I am sitting in for the majority leader, who's also the leader of the delegation, Honorable Ishungwa, who's had to attend to some business in Parliament. My name is Hassan Omar. Also, we have an apologies from the Honorable Cecily Marire, who's the Governor of Embu, who's undertaking some work at the Embu County with respect to the Tourism Week. We have the Senator, who's also the majority leader, Senator of Kericho, Senator Aaron Cheriot, who's also in Lodwa, actually in Turkana. There's Senator Mashinani, as you all know, in Turkana County. There's also the apologies from the Senate, the leader of delegation from the Azimio side, His Excellency Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, but who's ably represented by none other than the leader of minority in the National Assembly, the Honorable Opio Wandae. Karibu, Mwana Chairman. I believe you are Dr. Ejore.
Yes, sir. And some guidance, please. I understand you wanted to do some presentation. We shall please plead with you to avoid that, since you have the presentation ready with us. So just make highlights of your presentation, because the time is so short. It's 20 minutes maximum. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
Proceed.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ejore is my name, and allow us to do a short introduction of this team. Thank you very much. Let me start from my left.
Gabriela Lorere from Turkana East. I'm Beatrice Askul Moy from Turkana County.
Beatrice.
Thank you.
I'm Michael Ekaya Remor from Turkana North.
Honorable Peter Lokoel from Turkana Central.
Basra Ifra Ali from Turkana Central.
Mark Ekal Ekwam from Turkana West.
Thank you very much. The chairs of the delegation and members, the Turkana Professional Association, is pleased to come and present their oral presentation to this committee. And we are going to touch all the 5 sections, all the 5 issues.
Okay. We are having a consideration of earlier position. If you think the slides can be faster, you are free to make a decision.
Yes. So you can do the slide, sure.
All right. So we're waiting for the technical team to make sure.
In the meantime, you can telling us more, Daktari, what you do.
Thank you, Chair. We are going to have our position on issue 1, outstanding constitutional matter, and issue 2 also, electoral justice, and issue 3, entrenching funds into the Constitution, and finally, issue 4 and issue 5 of the issues presented by this commission. TPA is Turkana Professional Association, a registered non-professional association from Turkana community, and we are non-political. All right, sorry. Non-political. An issue on high cost of living. Our position in this is that Turkana community has the main economic activity on livestock keeping, and because of that, the reality of climate change has adversely affected the pastoralist community. And as a result, there has resulted to long droughts, prolonged droughts, which has subjected the community to anger of many livestock and the death of many livestock, and has affected also the school or education sector, where many children and students have dropped out of school. And this high cost of living has also been encouraged by the vastness of the county, which is 77,000 square kilometers. And because of this, the high cost of fuel also has also resulted to a high transportation of goods and services, where the county gets its almost 99% of goods and services or crops outside the county. Our position is that we request that the national government to enhance the school feeding program and increase boarding schools for pastoralist community. This will improve access to education and retention to various schools. The national government should also allocate special fund to support pastoralist communities against harmful climate changes. And this is going to be able now to assist the pastoralist community. And more importantly, we have international border points of Kibish, Todonyang, Nadapal, and Lukiriama. This border point can be operationalized to ease movement of goods and services in the county and to lower the cost of business in those areas. On promoting national unity, Turkana community supports and promotes national unity. We support homogeneity, and we are highly integrated with other communities, not only in Turkana County, but also in other counties such as Laikipia, Samburu, Isiolo, where Turkana community are second most populous community. The Turkana community face a lot of discrimination, especially during issuance of national identification documents like IDs and passports, which aggrieves entitlement of any Kenyan citizen as enshrined in the Article 12 of the Kenyan Constitution. Our recommendation is that there should be no vetting of Turkana people when it comes to the national identification documents such as IDs and passports. On inclusivity in public appointment, Turkana County and community is adversely marginalized in state appointments as evidenced by the recent report released by the Senate on ethnic composition audit report. And the findings of this report reveal that the Turkana people employed in all the national positions in the public service and independent commission were only 0.01%. This unfortunate finding is a violation of the national values and principles of good governance, of equity, inclusivity, and non-discrimination. Our recommendation is that a mechanism be put in place to ensure appointments of marginalized professionals in high-ranking positions in public service and independent commissions, a legal framework to address and institute affirmative action on employment of marginalized groups, similar to equalization fund, be enacted by Parliament. We also recommend that the Turkana professionals be appointed to high positions in government, such as CEOs, MDs, and ambassadors, because our observation is that for the last 50 years, or more than 50 years of independence, we've not had a CEO in any parastatal for Turkana community. On issue 2, restructuring and reconstitution of IBC, Turkana professionals respect the Article 88 of the Kenyan Constitution 2010 that created IBC. Reconstitution of IBC should focus on the number of commissioners and the body that recruits the commissioners. Delaying recruitment of this commission is a disservice to the country on matters policy, strategy, oversight, and representation. Our position is therefore that an independent panel appointed by the president should interview and recommend for appointment members of the commission to the president, and that they should be persons with experience in election management and democracy and serve for a permanent contract period of 6 years. We also recommend that we increase the number of commissioners to 9 and possibly recruit 1 commissioner from Turkana community, since we are underrepresented in the public service employment. On restructuring, we recommend that we retain the current permanent and professional and experienced secretariat at IBC, and that Parliament should strengthen the legal frameworks governing the conduct of election and boundary. On boundary delimitation, we see that Turkana County, having the big land mass of 77,000 kilometers square, representing 13% of the Kenyan mass, needs to be delimited. This Turkana County is divided into 3 major grazing units: Turkana North, Turkana Central, Turkana South. And the 3 expansive territory sections and grazing units informs the rationale for Turkana County to be delimited into 3 counties, 12 constituencies,
and 60 county wards assemblies. Turkana County landmass is much bigger than many of the counties that we have currently, which among them include Lamu, Meru, Nyamira, just to name a few. This massive land mass poses both logistical and administrative constraints for quick service delivery to the people of Kenya in that region. Additionally, Turkana County borders 3 international borders that require closer administrative units for effective and timely management of cross-border resource-based conflict. More importantly, Turkana County is endowed with a wealth of resources that, when well tapped, can support not only the new proposed electoral and administrative units, but the current and the future of the Kenyan economy, beside having the capacity to become a regional and commercial hub for Uganda, Southern Sudan, and Ethiopia. These key resources include, among others, livestock sector, oil and gas, groundwater resources, geothermal, solar and wind energy, mineral resources, and labor. The proposed counties are additional 2 counties to make it 3. And Turkana North has a population of 341,000, and Turkana Central 293, and Turkana South 292,000. And these are the maps which we have shown, and the counties which we have proposed. 2 additional counties, 6 more constituencies, and 30 more county assemblies, wards. We also recommend that the IBC to be maintained as in charge of both elections and boundary delimitation exercise as provided for in Article 88, Section 4. On audit of the presidential 2022 presidential election, TPA respects the institutional independence of Supreme Court and its exclusive jurisdiction to hear and determine disputes relating to election to the office of the president as provided for in Article 163. TPA shall respect the opinions of majority of Kenya in regards to audit of the 2022 presidential election. On issue 3, entrenching funds into the Constitution, TPA highly recommends entrenchment of the national government CDF into the Constitution to help Turkana benefit from the principal objects and purpose for which the fund was established under Section 3 of the National CDF Act, number 30 of 2015. And so is the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, which also includes also the Senate Oversight Fund. TPA recommends the entrenchment of all these funds into the Constitution. On issue 4, establishment and entrenchment of state offices, TPA supports the proposed constitutional amendment to establish and entrench the office of the leader of opposition. This will sort out the legal void created by the 2010 Constitution, which denied the second best presidential candidate in a general election a chance to play a role in the country's governance. TPA believes this will ensure and this will secure and protect the gains of the COK 2010, enhance checks and balances, and hold executive accountable, and address the recurrent post-election violence and entrench inclusivity in governance. On the issues of the office of the Cabinet Prime Minister. We also support the constitutional amendment to establish this office. Finally, on issue 5, on fidelity to political parties, TPA is of the opinion that is of strong opinion that we should be able to have a strong conviction to fidelity to the intents and purposes of political parties as presented by the Act, Political Parties Act 11/2021. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I can see, Honorable, it's the practice of this committee to allow some interventions from members. So I can see Honorable Wambilianga wants to speak to ask a question or speak to the issues.
Thank you, Chair. It's not exactly a question, but it's kind of an intervention and a clarity. In your presentation, thank you very much, first of all, for your very elaborate presentation. And for the first time, at least, we have had a slide being used in these presentations. Congratulations to your team. My observation, or rather question, goes to the point you put across, saying that among your recommendations, that the Turkana people should not be vetted when getting IDs or passports. Bearing in mind that Turkana is one of the counties that is on the border, don't you think we will risk a lot of foreigners, mainly from Uganda and other neighboring countries, infiltrating through Kenya and purporting to be Turkanas just because we have allowed such a thing to go on? And secondly,
just as a point of information, Honorable Mbilianga, there is already progressive steps which are very advanced to remove all forms of vetting for all Kenyans, the Turkanas, the Somalis, and all other border communities and minorities.
Okay, I'm guided. And again, maybe give us a formula, because we have had a lot of counties, stakeholders from different counties coming here, and the proposals are actually to increase counties and even increase constituencies. But for Turkana, it's a bit, there seems to be a lot of interest because you're talking of 6 more constituencies. Did I get that clearly? Yes. And then also 2 counties. Is it 2 counties including the current Turkana county, then another additional one, or 2 more?
2 additional.
2 more additional counties.
To make it 3.
To make it 3. Maybe you give us a formula of which how you've arrived at this, because all the rest seem to be just wanting maybe the split of a county into 2, then maybe for MPs, for the constituencies, at least they're talking of maybe 1 or 2 in addition. But this is rather too advanced a number. Thank you.
Okay, let me just first of all, thank you very much. This team, I feel challenged. Maybe I should also start working on CII or Luo Professional Association to rival you or to emulate what the good work we are doing. But let me go to the point. This presentation is wonderful, and it brings out very, very salient matters, especially on the issue of Article 43, or alleviating cost of living. Because understand, I must also confess that as a movement, we have had a long-standing relationship with the Turkana county and people. The issue of climate change has been captured very well, which is causing havoc to the pastoral communities. You know the case we have currently of Turkana brothers who are arrested in Uganda, are currently languishing in jail in Jinja. I think Jinja, yeah. It's a matter we are pursuing. But also the issue of infrastructure, especially at Nadapal, the issue of the road infrastructure, okay? They have come out very well, and I hope in the fullness of time, this needs to be addressed, not only for the Turkana, but for the vast majority of the pastoralist communities. But then, on the issue of the audit of the last year's presidential elections, you have said very well that you agree, of course, you stand by the guidance of the you stand by the ruling of the Supreme Court, which is true. But then you go ahead and say that you will abide by the decision or the views of the majority of Kenyans. That's where I got confused. If you could just clarify that, Professor. Finally, on the issue of the proposed subdivision of the constituencies, my view is that, my view is that this is merited. And the chair to listen to me, the leader. Yes, Turkana County is vast, and indeed it merits more constituencies. Yes, it merits more constituencies, and it's a matter, I think, which I'll be looking at in tandem with the rest of our work, okay? Because there are similar requests from other peoples, but this is very, very good, and we shall really benefit from this presentation. Thank you. Beatrice. Yes.
Just a minute. Let's listen to
division.
Yes, Beatrice, it's cool. Why don't we just let everybody ask their questions or comments? Yes.
I also join my colleagues in appreciating your detailed memorandum that speaks to most of the issues that this committee is trying to look into. Now, you professionals, I'm sure you have accountants, you have lawyers, you have all manner of professionals. And I've seen what you have, what you call recommendations on high cost of living. To alleviate the high cost of living, we recommend the following. There has been an outcry by Kenyans that the rate at which the current regime is introducing new taxes is contributing to the high cost of living. I don't know whether you as professionals, you sat to take a stand, whether you support these high taxes, and whether you appreciate that they are contributing, because you are professionals, you can sit and do analysis. I don't know whether you have sat down to analyze how this is adversely affecting professionals. I was in a funeral and a teacher was complaining that the housing levy and the projected 2.7% on NHI will wipe out his payslip. So what's your take as professionals? That's number one. Number two, I join you, when you make a statement at, I think, page 8, that you are adversely marginalized in state appointments, as evidenced by the report that the Senate released on ethnic composition audit report. I join you, and my ethnic group is with you there, because we are also in the same category. We don't have a PS in the entire of the establishment, national government establishment. So we want to get solutions from you as professionals. You are not politicians, you are not partisan, but you can see that there is, the way you have said here, there is clear marginalization. What would you propose as a solution? Do you want us to say we can't trust politicians? I'm one of them. We can't trust politicians. We need an act of parliament to say if one community has a CS, another one gets a PS. What solution can you offer to us from where you are sitting as professionals? Thank you.
Okay, then nice to see some one or two of my friends in the panel, including our dear sister, who today I know you're from Turkana. You're unlikely to be Turkana. And I know Jore, we have a Dawood Jore in Mombasa, who's one of our friends. Just two questions.
Yes.
What is the economic viability of these three counties in terms of, one, the ability to raise revenue, and two, what are the population sizes that are going to be left in these counties? Two, I think when we speak about, I also come from a minority, and we speak about structural and systemic exclusion from government. I think we must not be limited in terms of looking at a PS level. You might have one PS and have nobody down there. Like us from Mombasa, we might have one PS, the first time in the history of Mombasa, for us to have a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Transport. Mombasa has never had a permanent secretary since independence. This was the first time to have a permanent secretary. But even there has been systemic exclusion over years, so we need to ensure that we populate all other tiers. So let us not only look at it from that ambassadorial, commissioner, the CS. There could be, you could look systematically marginalized or excluded from cabinet, like Waupio and I would say. But if you look at the other quantums of appointments, you'll find a lot of Luos down there. So let us also, I don't want to touch on these issues, and some of them were deliberately done when there was a Nusumkate government, where people were put into, so that the race in Kenya is about populating people with part of our composition. So I'm asking, in terms of looking at it from a practical point of view, we need to have a more clearer agenda on how to systematically cure marginalization, including appointments and recruitments. And affirmative action is allowed by the Constitution.
Answer in less than 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much.
I thought you had a point.
I want one of us at school to respond to some of these questions. Karibu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm saying, Mr. Chair of the TPA, for this opportunity. Actually, there is issues that we'd want to make clear. As you see, our numbers are not huge enough like the teams that came ahead of us. It's simply because we are trying to send an information that these things are happening at the headquarters of a city for Kenya. And because we are less represented at national, we had to bring a number to speak for the rest who are not represented. So our small number represents the number of Turkana people, Turkana nation in national governments. Now, the reason why we are making our point clear here is simply because we want to make sense before you that Turkana as a county is not the existing one, is not enough for us. We want to make a case that would, if there is a provision to add 1 or 2 to other counties, we will also be considered and be given more than 1. And we can justify our point because we are not like, we have a own unique case. We are one of the counties that is not adequate enough. We only have 1 commandant at Lodwar town, serving a distance from now Lodwar town, which is the headquarters of the county, to the far end of Kapedo, over 400 kilometers. Kapedo is volatile. If you see issues like Kibish is almost 600 kilometers from Lodwar town, under the same command of 1 officer. So, and sometimes this random insecurity affects entire Turkana. You can imagine who do you know, or people in Kainuk, or people in bordering Uganda, Loima. So at the end of the day, the officer is condemned, names are called on our officers, yet there is one man to make a decision that is supposed to be immediate and disastrous in nature in a small moment. So that is why if you get another additional headquarters that would get another county commandant and commissioner somewhere else, at least something will get closer to the people. Number 2, now responding to the point of cost of living. Of course, away from the prices that is being regulated, there is one typical case right now. We see you people mandamaring on ugali, unga. Let me tell you, the unga you talk of 200 here is the unga we get almost 400 in Lodwar town and vast part of Turkana County. So we wonder, the government regulates, but the government do not make sure they supervise the regulation they give. At our places of vastness of Turkana, where now the trader is the one to decide the price. So we are completely disadvantaged. But in a situation where we had areas developed closer to the people, we will have this market price a bit controlled compared to the monopoly that is there right now. Now, on the issue of bad cost of living, what prompts a better cost of living of a nation or of a community is the government investment in that area. From before devolution, we've had every project done by a national government in the name of flagship projects. Trust you me, there are several things that have occurred announced by our national government half year that is found in Turkana. There is oil in Turkana.
There is water that is supposed to serve Kenya 70 years, all of us together, in Turkana. There is a lot of wind pipe now, wind power now, in Turkana, solar, in Turkana. But you find all these flagships are not benefiting the Turkana. And you dare ask us how we will improve our living standard when these things are done away from us, or even the ones that have been developed so far, they are not being quite beneficial to the people around there. So in as far as we are saying, we want a county. This is the reason why we need additional county and additional constituencies. We will have power to develop our own thing, and I hope the constitution amendment that is being now proposed will also have a situation where if a society or a community is disadvantaged, then that community should also have a provision within the law that allows them to do their own thing, especially if they have history of governments not having attended to their issues. So that is one reason why we need autonomy a bit in this matter of county. Number 3 on the other matter is state appointments. Since independence, we are professionals. If we give you the CVs here, genuine degrees, not the degrees of next to town like this was of River Road, genuine degrees, genuine masters and genuine PhDs. Trust you me, we are not anywhere. This appointment since independence, I can count on my fingers. Since independence, 1 PS, we can tell you, this is the second. The other government of Jubilee, only one, we had 1 PS, 1 minister, and we can tell you the names because we've never gotten beyond the first ones. Higher. NCOs, no. President heads, no. Only have adequate, the other day being again, given his qualification, Now, if you look at the way we are being handled honestly, what happens when we miss national representation? When we miss these doctors not get a job at national, they crowd the county. A reason why we need another additional county. Our single county cannot handle the cases of all the professionals we have. Because we crowd, the positions. The highest position is the one of CC, chief officers, the next directors, period. Then what happens to the rest? We need additional, if that is the place that God has placed us in this Republic of Kenya to be employed, then give us more devolved units that can get our own professionals on board. The other question is about audit of 2022 presidential election. I don't know. I read. I saw that, and I think let's treat it as a typing error. Technical typing error. Because yes, the position that we would want to make clear here, and we don't fear anything, is because we need to get things improved. If Kenyans have to get a reason to vote next time, please let's change something up here. Let's have that thing opened. Commissioners are the one who handled. And Kenyans feel like there is a raw deal that happened. How do you connect? How do you put it together? A Kenyan who is saying, this is not what I gave. And you are telling us, this is what you gave. Open the thing, we see who did what, who got what, so that peace prevail. Because some of this...
The thing here means what?
The server.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Let me finish.
But school, you are redoing the presentation. Can you keep it brief? Yeah, because you are now redoing the presentation and rebutting even some of the things that you have written in this presentation.
Chair,
thank you.
Let me allow Peter to comment in 1 minute.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. We had a question on why we needed the three counties and the resources to sustain them. Just for knowledge, we have Turkana North, and Turkana North has minerals. We have Turkana Central, which has the lake and which has also minerals, gold included. Turkana North and West have an aquifer, which will take the whole of Kenya 70 years plus. Turkana South has geothermal, it has minerals, and it has culture as well. Remember, we also have a resource of 56% of Turkana being youth. This is a population that, if given an opportunity, I'm sure it will propel Turkana to the highest. That is about just resources, not minding about the landmass. Looking at the Constitution of Kenya, Article 188, that is giving us the perimeters of getting a new county. Turkana North will have population of 300 plus, unlike many other counties that are existing today that have only 200 or something like that. Turkana Central has 250 plus, again the same. So we meet the perimeters to do this. We have the resources. However, we might want a change in the constitution that we are given an opportunity to develop our own resources and not to depend on the goodwill which has not been forthcoming. Okay?
Very good.
When you talk about taxes and we talk about cost of living, it is determined by livelihoods. Look at Turkana East and South, how their livestock and their resources have been depleted by insecurity. What good will come from there when all that they have has been depleted or has been taken away from them? This is why they would need a country of their own so that they are able effectively, within the confines of that law, to have the resources. Chair, for your information, the military in Kibish gets their fuel in Lokchogyo. Kibish is 500 kilometers from Lodwa, 200, and Lokchogyo is 220 from Lodwa. That is 720 kilometers from where they are. And they assign the same amount of fuel, for example, to the same military in maybe central Kenya. How many distances are those? These guys just spend all the fuel going and coming back. They have nothing to respond for. And then we start saying, oh, these guys are not responding. So we have to look at Turkana not just as Turkana. Turkana has 15 territorial clans, which you might not be knowing. And that's why we are putting them into three counties. Because of grazing, the nature of livelihood is pastoralism. And because of grazing, they graze within those confines. And every time they come together, because those in south or north have to cross, there's conflict. How about if the government then gives us the three counties and the constituencies? Then the management within that will utilize resources within that than spreading thin and not being seen. And that's why we usually say we are coming to Kenya, because it's only in Kenya that people are represented. It's only in Kenya. But Turkana have never seen a CEO since 50 years, 60 years now. How they want to be inclusive or included in the matters of Kenya.
I totally appreciate. Chairman, I give you the last word so that we can now say thank you. Basra, you want to say something?
Yes, Chair. Yes. Thank you very much.
Keep it very brief.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we have been well represented, and the proposition and the position that has been put in this document and that has been put in the slide is the position of the General Turkana Professional Forum, which is more than 300 or is it 400 people? 400. Yes. So we will not change anything when we come here. That is one position. The second position is about the issue of security. As you all well aware, the national government is supposed to have a mandate on national security. And Turkana is surrounded by three different countries. And also, we have a lot of animosity between inter-county collaboration. So we have Pokot, we have Samburu, and you have seen what has been happening of late in our local media and what has been happening in Laikipia, Samburu, and Isiolo. That is cross-cutting, and it's a national issue. So for us as Turkana Professional Forum, the most important thing, and I think Madam Chair has also pointed a very strong, one of the members of the commission has pointed a very strong issue, which is, yes, we want people in these borders to be recognized, but at the end of the day, we also have to know and protect, and for security purposes, know who is being given a national ID and who is being given a passport from that end. So, Chair, I really respect this position, and I hope if there is anything that will be picked from this conversation today, it will be, one, the issue of the representation of the counties, because we know all counties in Kenya would want to get different counties. But Turkana in particular is asking this because of a national security concern, one. And secondly, we want the issue of the food security to be really tackled, especially the ASAL areas. You have seen, as our co-chair Wandati has just said, climate issue is a very strong issue in the ASAL areas, and therefore the government should either look at something as little as having the feeding programs in all the ASAL schools, and also more particularly in Turkana. So thank you very much, Chair, for that position.
Thanks very much. Maybe the Chair would say something.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. As we summarize our document, I want to emphasize that the cost of living has actually great impact. The high cost of living has had great impact to the Turkana community. Most of our vegetable or fresh come from outside the county, as far as Marikiti Market in Nairobi.
by the time they reach Lodwar, it becomes 5 times higher than the cost in Nairobi because of the fuel, which results into high transport costs, which results into high fares by all standards. And because of that, we would like to see how best the issue of climate change can be made as a law, so that the pastoralist community can be given a fund to be able to help them and elevate them from the pangs of drought and persistent, because they are not getting fertilizers. So if they're not getting fertilizers, then the alternative should be a fund to relieve them from this anger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I think on that note, I wish you well. We will consider a significant part of your recommendations or your input. In us, you have no doubt that you have an ally. We talk the same language. You might look Turkana, but we're all Turkanas in marginalization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next group, please. I think we have the JSC.
Yeah, Judicial Service Commission.
Yeah, please.
I see a number of people who I can recognize. Is Daud Ejore your relative down in Mombasa? Yes.
He was the first DC from Turkana.
Okay.
But he's late.
No, I'm talking about Daud. He's married in Mombasa he's from Turkana, Ejore. Aya. No, he is Daud Ejore.
Daud Ejore?
Yeah.
No.
You know him? Okay. Dr. Ejore. Welcome, JSC. Just as a quick round of introductions, we have Honorable Amina Mnyazi. She is the MP Malindi and a member of this committee. We have the Honorable Senator of Nyamira, Honorable Senator Bukongo Mgeni, who is a member of the Fraternity of Law Senior Council, who is also a member of this committee. We have my sister, Honorable Catherine Wambilianga, Women Rep, Bungoma County, who is a member of this committee. I am sitting in for Honorable Kimani Shungwa, who is our delegation leader. He has had to rush to Parliament to continue the discussion on the health bills that have been presented there. I am Hassan Omar, Member of Parliament for Yala, and a member of this committee. Also an apology from the Deputy Leader of our delegation, Honorable Cecily Mbarire, Governor Embu, who is hosting the Tourism Week with the Minister, the Cabinet Secretary. Also an apology from the Honorable Senator of Kericho, Honorable Aaron Churiot, who is actually in actual effect in Turkana, where they've just come from, with this Mashinani, Senator Mashinani program. We have an apology from the Deputy President, who's the leader of this delegation, from this other side, from the Azimio side, Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, and we also, Eugene also stepped out, Eugene Wamalwa, but they are ably represented by the Deputy Leader of the delegation, Honorable Opio Wandai, who is also the Minority Leader in the National Assembly. Karibuni sana.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Member Omar Hassan Omar and the Honorable Opio Wandai, who are sitting in for the co-chairs. My name is Paul Nemo. I'm the Deputy Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, representing the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, both in her capacity as the Secretary of the Judicial Service Commission and also the Judiciary. Together with me are my colleagues, whom I'll ask to introduce themselves so that we can then proceed.
Good afternoon, members of protocols observed. Beatrice Kamau, Director Finance, Judiciary.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Martin Mashira,
I'm the Director, Legal Services, Judicial Service Commission. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Bernard Kasavuli, Deputy Registrar, Supreme Court.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Mayuli. I'm a magistrate in the Office of the Chief Registrar.
Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chairs and members. With your permission, we could proceed with the presentation that we have. So we'll make a presentation.
Have no more than 20 minutes. Yes, please try to work within that time frame.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. We will strive to work within that time. So I will first begin with the memorandum from the Judicial Service Commission. The Judicial Service Commission is established under Article 171 of the Constitution, and the mandate of the JSC is to play an oversight role, really, over the judiciary as one of the three arms of government, and it's to ensure the promotion and facilitation of the independence and accountability of the judiciary. For purposes of this engagement this afternoon, we want to focus on 5 issues. The first one is about the judiciary budget and the judiciary fund. The judiciary fund is the only fund of an institution that is in the Constitution under Article 173. And the Commission's position is that without financial and operational independence, both the judiciary and the JSC are not in a proper place to provide the very much required oversight over the judiciary and even over the judiciary fund. And we are therefore recommending that the Constitution and the Judiciary Fund Act be amended to incorporate the Judicial Service Commission, because it is not, as one of the beneficiaries of the fund. The fund only talks about the judiciary and not the Judicial Service Commission. So the proposal and the recommendation, very kind recommendation to this committee, is that the Constitution be amended to include the JSC in the Judiciary Fund. On the issue of the budget, again relating to the judiciary and JSC, in order to ensure that the budget of the judiciary and the commission is shielded in accordance with the spirit of Article 173 that guaranteed the judiciary fund and to ensure that there's financial autonomy, we are proposing that the budget ought to be set at a specific percentage of the national budget. And our proposal is to have this at not less than 3.5% of the national budget. When you compare the budget that is allocated to the judiciary receives less than 1%. Actually, to be more precise, it is 0.6% of the national budget. And when you look at the span, the extent of the courts and the responsibility that we have, that is woefully inadequate. We are talking about 140 court stations across the length and breadth of this country. And so when we ask for this figure, it is to get us at par and also to put us in a position where we are able to provide justice to the people. Talking about other outstanding matters, we have the issue of the position of the secretary to the Judicial Service Commission. As is currently established, the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary is the secretary of the commission, but and apart from that, the Chief Registrar is also the accounting officer of the judiciary. And so we are proposing, for purposes of promoting efficiency and avoiding the blurring of functions, to have those two positions separated, so that you have the secretary of the commission and the Chief Registrar being different positions. On another issue of courts of equal status with the High Court, we have the Employment and the Labor Relations Court, and we also have the Environment and Land Court. The judges that practice in those courts cannot practice in any other high court. And that is a matter that would require an amendment because there is a limitation because of jurisdictional challenges. And so the proposal that we make is that the specialized courts be made part of the High Court to allow the mobility of judges across the courts, or have the judges who are serving in those specialized courts allowed to move across the courts. Because as it is right now, it's only High Court judges that have got the jurisdiction to practice in the rather to adjudicate in the other divisions. But for the specialized courts, that is limited. On another issue of the qualification of judges of the superior courts, the law as it currently stands is that a High Court judge, Court of Appeal judge, you need to have 10 years experience as a superior court judge or a legal practitioner or a distinguished academic to be able to be appointed as a High Court judge. The same qualification applies to a Court of Appeal judge. And it is our proposal that there needs to be some stratification as to the number of years of experience from the High Court judge and courts of equal status right up to the Supreme Court. So our proposal is to have a High Court judge retained at the 10 years, that is the experience of 10 years as a legal practitioner or an academician. A Court of Appeal have that enhanced to 15 years, and then a Supreme Court judge have that enhanced to 20 years, so that there's a stratification and also a recognition of the different levels of jurisdiction. Turning to the issue of governance, we have the position of the Deputy Chief Justice. The Judicial Service Act designates the Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary. Section 5.3 of the Judicial Service Act provides the Deputy Head of the Judiciary and Vice President of the Supreme Court as the Deputy Chief Justice, and who is designated as being responsible to the Chief Justice in the exercise and functions of the duties of the office. It is noted that both the Constitution and the Act, they do not detail the functions of the Deputy Chief Justice. And it just leaves the discretion to the Chief Justice to determine what will be the role and the functions and the duties of the Deputy Chief Justice. And so it is our proposal that there needs to be a constitutional and a statutory amendment to introduce a detailed, detailing the specific functions of the Deputy Chief Justice akin to Article 147 of the Constitution, which gives specific duties of the Deputy President. Still on the Deputy Chief Justice, when acting as a Chief Justice, the law provides in Section 5.4 of the Judicial Service Act that in the event of the removal, the resignation, or the death of the Chief Justice, then the Deputy Chief Justice shall act as the Chief Justice for a period not exceeding 6 months, pending the appointment of another Chief Justice. But the Act does not make provision, again, for the scope or the extent of the duties of the Deputy Chief Justice. Now, this is very different from when you have the senior-most judge of the Supreme Court. They are restricted to the administrative duties only, where there is no Chief Justice or Deputy Chief Justice. So we are proposing that there should be some constitutional and statutory amendments to specify the extent of the exercise of duties by the Deputy Chief Justice when acting as the Chief Justice. Still on the role of the Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice at JSC, Article 171.2 of the Constitution designates the Chief Justice as the chairperson of JSC. And under Article 250.10 of the Constitution, members of constitutional commissions are required to elect a vice chairperson from among themselves at their first sitting. And the universally accepted standard really is that when the chairperson is not available, the vice chairperson then sits in. However, there is a unique situation in the Judicial Service Commission where you have the Chief Justice as the chairperson by virtue of being the substantive holder of that office. But in the absence of the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice assumes office as the acting Chief Justice in other roles. It is not clear whether the Deputy Chief Justice can then, while acting as the Chief Justice, preside over meetings of the Judicial Service Commission as the acting Chief Justice. So we are saying, for purposes of clarity, it is important that there is an amendment so that that matter is made absolutely clear, just to avoid that lacuna. On another aspect of governance, we have the, in terms of accountability, we have the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman, which is under the Chief Justice, but it is an internal mechanism that has been created. It is proposed that the commission, that the Judiciary Ombudsman within the institution is restructured, or in the alternative, it is entrenched in the Judicial Service Act, so that the commission will then have powers to appoint ombudsman, who will then be responsible to the commission through the Chief Justice, so that then they will have another mechanism. Finally, as far as the commission is concerned, there is the recommendation to amend Article 168(1) of the Constitution to empower the commission to respond to minor infractions that may not require the recommendation for the establishment of a tribunal for the removal of judges. Because there is a lacuna, how do you deal with small infractions that do not meet the threshold of having a matter forwarded for a tribunal by the President for the removal of a judge? Honorable Chairs, that is the presentation on the Judicial Service Commission. If I may now proceed to the judiciary, unless there are specific questions you'd like us to address.
No, you proceed, but then time is of essence.
Yes.
If you would just highlight, because you have the writer.
Thank you.
Please, yeah.
We will do that. Honorable Chair, in the interest of time, the sole issue we wanted to raise as the judiciary is about the funding. And we have given a breakdown. You have the presentation. We have given a breakdown about the operationalization of the Judiciary Fund, which is under Article 173, as I've mentioned. The fund was operationalized in the year 2022, 1st of July. However, it has encountered a number of challenges. And because of those challenges, we have made proposals to ensure that the fund attains the objective for which it was established. And those specific proposals, Honorable Chair, first is that given the high cost of escalation, we are recommending that our annual budget be at least 3.5% of the national budget. This is in tandem with what has been recommended by the Commission, and that this provision be entrenched in the Constitution. So we have given the reasons for the increase of the budget, and in the interest of time, Chair, following your direction, that is already provided there. The rationale, the reasoning has already been provided. The second recommendation is that we need to restrict the controller of budget in the approval of the withdrawal of funds only at the first stage from the consolidated fund to the judiciary fund. Because as it is right now, the controller of budget has to approve both withdrawal from the consolidated fund, which we have no problem with, but the second approval from the withdrawal of the judiciary fund has been causing challenges. And we do not see the reason for that second approval, given that we have the chief registrar who is responsible for the operation of the judiciary fund, and we have other mechanisms such as the office of the Auditor General that then comes to audit the expenditure of the judiciary. So our view and our recommendation is that that second approval needs to be removed. It does not suffice, rather it does not help the issues of accountability that you are seeking to have, but only just provide a bottleneck. The third recommendation is that the unspent funds in the judiciary fund account at the end of the financial year should be automatically rolled over and revoted in the subsequent financial year. And this will require some amendments, and the idea is to ensure that the monies that have previously been allocated then can be utilized without the usual challenges of end of financial year procurement delays, and we are able to meet our obligation. So, Chair, on the issue of the judiciary, that would be the main thing. But I'd like to point out some very specific recommendations from the Supreme Court itself. And we have, with your permission, taken the liberty to submit this under the judiciary, yes, but specifically from the Supreme Court. And this has the endorsement of the court itself. And here we have just 4 issues that we'd like to highlight. The first one is on the increase of the number of Supreme Court judges from 7 to 11. The court is established under Article 163, and under the various articles, we have got the jurisdiction of the court, which is quite expansive. Apart from determining the presidential petitions, we have appeals that come from the Court of Appeal. We have appeals from tribunals that are established for the removal of a judge from the office, and we also have advisory opinions that the court renders. With the increase of the Court of Appeal judges now, we have more matters that are finding their way to the Supreme Court, and therefore there is a higher caseload in the Supreme Court. Remember, the quorum for the Supreme Court for the matters to proceed is 5 judges. Now, when we look at the court, which has got 7 members, we have got 2 of those members who sit in the Judicial Service Commission. We have the Chief Justice and 1 judge who represents the Supreme Court. So already you have 2 members who are out of the Supreme Court who are engaged in other duties in the Supreme Court. Of course, not to mention that sometimes judges may have to recuse themselves, or they may be indisposed and therefore unable to form the quorum. So the recommendation is that this number therefore be amended to make it 11, so that we do not have delay in matters that come before the Supreme Court. The second recommendation is for the extension of time. Timelines for the hearing and the disposal of presidential election petitions. There is very high expectation from Kenyans when it comes to the hearing and termination of presidential petitions, but we know it is a tall order. We all have witnessed the burden, and we know that 14 days, as is provided, is not quite adequate. And that is the reason why the court, in the 3 cycles, has given its verdict, but then reserved the reasoning. It's because the timeline cannot permit that time. And so the recommendation is to have the timeline moved from 14 days to 30 days, so that then the court can have adequate time. The third issue is on issues relating to discipline of Supreme Court judges. It is our position that the disciplining of Supreme Court judges should be handled by peers. When you look at the composition of the Judicial Service Commission, you have members, and you also have a judicial officer, magistrate, and others. And we feel that at the level of a Supreme Court judge, it is important to have peers who will handle disciplinary matters, so that it's given the gravity that it deserves and accepted also by the judges that would be the subject of the disciplinary process. The other recommendation there is therefore that we would have other retired judges considered to sit in the Judicial Service Commission to provide that. Finally, Chair, from benchmarks that we have held across the world on the Supreme Courts have got their own separate existence. Under the judiciary, yes, but operating in a semi-autonomous manner. And so we are proposing that the Supreme Court have its own budget that is separate from the judiciary through the amendment of Article 173, because this will ensure that there is more autonomy of the Supreme Court and is not subjected to the vicissitudes of budget cuts and budget allocations to preserve the supremacy and the sacrosanct nature of the Supreme Court. Honorable Chair, with those few remarks and our presentations, we rest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will start just from where you've left, very, very quickly. This idea of having peers to sit on the panel, this undertaking disciplinary proceedings against Supreme Court judges. I don't know if you have done some study to establish what is the situation in comparable jurisdictions. Because if that was the argument in respect of Supreme Court judges, then what would happen to the Court of Appeal judges, High Court judges? Because they're also subjected to the disciplinary process in JSC, which has got through magistrates, as you correctly put it. Okay? Is it acceptable when magistrates sit on disciplinary panel for judges of High Court and Supreme Court and Court of Appeal judges, and not proper when they sit in respect of disciplinary proceedings against Supreme Court judges? Just clarify that. Just note down. Just note it down. Then you have talked about the period, timeline, for dispensing with the presidential election petitions to be increased from 14 to 30 days. Okay? There is a school of thought, again, we just ponder about this, which holds that the longer it takes to dispense with these petitions, the more the country is kept in suspense. Okay? And that our country, unlike our more established democracies like America, cannot sustain that kind of suspense and anxiety. I don't know what you have to say about that. And finally, the issue of the court. You've indicated that you have got 140 courts across the country. Okay? Which, of course, is not adequate, if you ask me, and of course, I am sure you agree with that. What plans, other than looking for budgets from the exchequer, do you have in place to establish more courts, especially bearing in mind that previously you had some program with the World Bank? The World Bank or something like that. Yes, I remember very well when I used to be chair of PSE. You used to come before me to explain the expenditures of those funds. Did the program end? There was this World Bank funded program for establishing law courts. And now I've got interest in that. Because I've had a court in Ugunja. But there is no money. So please, kindly, thank you.
Mine also will be some quick comments. I share with some of your recommendations about creating actual functions for the DCJ. Why don't you go ahead and give us a proposal of those functions on the basis of your own experience? Because a lot of your statements are just broad. It's like, you're also a judicial arm. You can suggest very specific amendments in terms of what some of these amendments that you're seeking to do. There's also a general view that the JSC itself is overpopulated by judges or judicial officers, and therefore it is likely to exercise leniency on the part of discipline of judges. Most of the judges who have been disciplined, it has first, despite the protestation, it has had to occasion somebody like Sonko, releasing some videos and or some headlines in the newspapers that actually have forced action sometimes from the JSC. There are a lot of others probably that might not have received that type of highlight, which might not be having a similar impact, in terms of follow-up. The last one, I as Hassan Omar, it's my very personal view, I have no issues whatsoever for the Supreme Court to give its verdict and defer the full ruling to another day, because would it change anything materially? I saw the BBI ruling. I sat through it because I was very happy when the High Court was doing it. They were like reading a script that I associate with or I embrace. I remember in 2013 I was in the former Prime Minister's office. I just made my cup of tea and a lot of tea and cookies. We were expecting some lengthy judgment for only Willie Mutunga to appear. And in 10 minutes we were done. So when others came, the only reason they knew that we had lost that petition is because Ongoro was wailing. So we knew. So those who came later knew that it was this fast, you know. So, but I personally don't have an issue with it. But if you think that there's a reason why they think that it should be enhanced, maybe we get further detail. But that anxiety. To create more offices, separate commission secretary from the registrar. The registrar is a very